the Shelburne Selectboard meeting of January 9th, 2018. First item is consider approval of the agenda. I understand there are perhaps 15 or people present, but I think Jamie has something, and if anybody else does, please speak up.
Sure. I'd like to move to amend agenda item 20 to include a new subsection 5, Vermont Railway litigation.
Okay, to include it in item number 20.
20, right, 20 would be amended to include a new subsection 5.
Now? Okay.
So Colleen seconded.
So there was a motion and a second.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended, is that what it was?
Yes, specific to item 5 on 20.
Okay, motion to approve and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And one
All right,
one
next
abstain.
up. Okay, who abstained?
Josh.
Okay, we have to do a roll call vote then, if it's not unanimous. I vote aye. Colleen?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Josh?
Abstain.
Okay. We have the roll call vote. Next, consider approving Select Board minutes of December 12th, 19th, and 2nd. January 2nd, let's do it one at a time. December 12th, anybody have any comments?
Yes, on page 6, there's a typo in the misspelling of Chris Boyd's name.
Okay, anything else?
This is 12.
The 12th?
December
6 in
12th.
the last paragraph.
Right, I saw that one too.
Okay, hearing nothing else, would somebody like to move to approve the minutes of December 12th as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jerry, is seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Next up is approve the minutes of December 19th. Any comments? Hearing none, someone like to move to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Jerry, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jamie, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, someone approve the minutes of January 2nd. Any comments?
Yeah, it is a comment. And I just realized this from looking at it. Under number 4, there's a statement that Josh Jean recused himself but remained present in the Select Board meeting room until the meeting adjourned. And I find it curious that in that regard, where most of our roll call vote, or most of our votes are saying approve 4-0, and why wouldn't it just say Josh Dean is recused? I'm just wondering if there's some effort to make an editorial comment here. And if there isn't any...
I think that's what took place.
Yeah, I'm not objecting to the truth of the statement. What I'm saying is it's an unusual statement to be in the minutes, so to speak. It is more of a observation. Right.
No intent of a editorial comment. Actually, I think I sent those out the day of.
Yeah. I
You
just didn't
responded
even
back with an edit.
And you
And I
you
made
edit-
that-
you
I made the
did
edit that you
right.
requested.
And I said I just
Okay.
noticed this
But
now.
no effort of an editorial comment besides writing them.
Okay,
just
well then
wrote
I
them
would
in.
just suggest that we just change the statement to I recuse myself.
Well, under the ethics ordinance, recusal requires leaving the room.
I'm not sure
And
that, I'm
you
not
didn't
sure
do
that's
that.
true, but I could look it up for you if you'd like. I think there's difference between rules and best practices or accepted practices. And I think in this situation, there are a whole lot of other things that take place. So I don't think it's necessarily relevant.
I think it's appropriate, but if you want to make a motion to amend it, go ahead and make a motion to amend it. I'm going to vote against it, but go ahead.
Cool. Okay. I would like to make a motion to change item number 4 to simply state that Josh Dean recused himself, period.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Jamie, and my comment is, this ordinance clearly states that recusal requires leaving the room. And you didn't do that. The minutes are supposed to capture the salient facts of what happened and what was said. So I think it's appropriate to include. Anybody else have any comments?
Only that, in this particular circumstance, the recusal was based on a legal mediated agreement to which the town and Josh Dean both entered into, and the recusal that by best practices meant that when you recuse yourself, you leave the room. And I think this was just documenting that you recused yourself from making any, vote, but you still stayed present. And I do think that is salient to the agreement.
I don't.
And
Well, we can choose to disagree.
okay.
Okay, anyone else have any comments? Hearing none. All in favor of Josh's amendment?
Aye.
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 Okay. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote because it's not unanimous. Jerry?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Colleen?
Nay.
And nay for me. All right, someone like to move to
I'll move approval of
amended?
the amended minutes,
Second.
moved by Jerry. Is there a second?
January 2nd.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just
Same
like to,
comments as
sorry,
before
Gary,
from me?
I'd like to make the point, since it was said, that there was absolutely no effort of doing anything towards editorial. I sent out the minutes directly after the meeting. Josh actually responded within 12 hours with an edit, which I made promptly. And that was that. So I hope that the minutes, at least of this meeting, and Josh, I hope you will agree that there was no editorial comment except I was just taking the minutes. Okay?
All right, we have a motion to approve as amended and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Roll call vote. Jerry?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Jamie?
Aye.
Colleen?
Aye.
Nay for me. All right. We're on to the next item, which is public comments. This is a time during the meeting if anyone has something they'd like to say over which this board has jurisdiction that is not on tonight's agenda. Now is your time to speak. Joe, would you let me know if anybody has anything they want to say?
I can. Can you see on the VCAM feed?
I couldn't get on VCAM.
No.
Dr. Metz has a question. Ken Albert has a question.
Linda Reel.
Okay, we have two people.
3.
All right. All right, we'll have 10 minutes for this. Dr. Metz, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, my first question is, what is being done by the Select Board to ensure that Chief Warden receives public recognition for 30 years of service to the town of Shelburne? At a previous meeting, we agreed that this was not a satisfactory way to end 30 years of service, and that something needed to be done. Since then, I've heard nothing, and I'm hoping that there's been some effort on the part of the Select Board to rectify that situation? So that's my first question. My second question is, how is it possible for the Select Board to accept $20,000 from the Vermont National Resources Commission when they could not or would not take $2,500 from Mr. Davies Allen as a contribution toward another matter? It seems inconsistent to me, and it seems almost as if the Vermont National Resources Commission is acting as a well-heeled lobbyist and buying an outcome of the Select Board. So those are my two questions.
Okay, does anyone on the board wish to respond to, or Joe, it's town manager, to Dr. Metz's first question regarding former Chief Warden?
The only thing that, and, I just want to answer this very delicately so that I don't run aground of disclosing anything that I shouldn't disclose. But there, and this has been discussed in previous meetings about what our personal feelings are versus having to deal with a situation that was tough for everyone involved. And at the time, this was discussed, and it was, at least at that point, conveyed to us that it was not wanted. Now, whether at this juncture, making an overture, and because I think that it's due, 30 years of service deserves more than just walking quietly out the back door.
I agree. Thank you.
But when I say this delicately, then it's with the absolute and utmost respect that Chief Warden deserves, and I wouldn't want to foist something on him that if he isn't interested in that. But publicly, this is a difficult thing to talk about. And I'm certainly open to suggestions of how to rectify that, whether it's maybe, among us, we designate a spokesperson to talk to Chief Warden and just to discuss this further. Because I think that, regardless of maybe personal feelings towards members of the town, maybe he would like to hear from all the town people and have that opportunity.
Does anyone else want to say anything in regard to that?
I'd be happy to call Jim and see if he were willing and what his availability may be in terms of attending town meeting would be an appropriate time. I'd be happy to do that. I think with the passage of time, a lot of the sharper edges are dulled. They'll never be completely smooth, but in anybody's mind, but I think it's more than appropriate, and agree with Colleen, and I think my colleagues, that he should be recognized for the length and quality of service. So I'd be happy with Joe's help, or working with Joe to give him a call and see if that suits him, and if so, we'll proceed from there.
Thank you.
And I would agree. I mean, I don't think there has been any other discussion other than what you've heard now. And I think Colleen's made some good points. I think the most important is that this has to be right for him.
It's timely, by the way, because we're about to start talking about town meeting arrangements and whatnot. So
Thank you.
thank you for raising it.
Jeremy?
I concur. I absolutely support it and think it's a good idea, and thank you, Terry, for taking the lead on it.
Okay, my thoughts on this is there was counsel on both sides of this issue, and I am totally in favor of recognizing Chief Warden should he want to be recognized. I do think, because it's a resolution that was reached with former Chief Warden represented by council, as was the town, that there should be an initial call between council to see if the chief is receptive to a call, and if so, then we go forward from there.
Well, I would suggest that council stay out of it, and we have a little personal attention to this gentleman, and not through lawyers. That's my suggestion, of course.
Okay. Next question, Dr. Betts asked about.
The question was, how can the select board accept $20,000 from VNRC, which is like a lobbyist contribution, when they wouldn't accept $2,500 from Mr. Davies Allen for another town business? That was the question.
Okay. Joe, do you want to respond to that?
There's a select board motion to accept, right?
I think it'd be more appropriate if the board responded to that, Gary, beginning
Okay, I
with you.
just wanted to, I didn't know if Joe wanted to respond first, but I'm happy to have anybody go. If you want to talk, Jerry, go right ahead.
No? I voted against it, so I'd hardly be an advocate for the answer to the question, would I?
Purely from a procedural perspective, I think what Joe said was true. There was a motion for one, and a motion was not made. For whatever reason, there was not a motion made.
No, it was ruled, the chairman ruled it out of order.
That's what I'm
And
saying.
made a statement that it was unacceptable.
Right.
And I wonder why the same doesn't pertain. That's what I'm wondering.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable statement.
So is there an answer to this question, please?
There is a difference between public and private donations. In addition, the Ethics and Conflict of Ordinance specifically provides a mechanism for funding. The litigation does not. There are numerous examples of municipalities and even states setting up organizations to accept donations for litigation purposes. As a matter of fact, in the state of Delaware, I understand that there is something that's specifically addressing accepting donations in regard to water quality. So there's quite a distinction between the two. Somebody else wanted to make a comment? I can't remember who it was. Ken Albert, I think.
The question was, how can select boards accept a $20,000 donation from the Vermont Natural Resources Commission when they would not accept a $2,500 donation from Mr. Davies Allen for another town matter? I don't understand that distinction.
I don't think I quite want to answer it that way. I have a question.
No,
I think he misunderstood.
I think the confusion here is that the chair moved on to your question next and concluded his response to you, Doctor.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any conclusion or, in fact, any answer.
I would like to ask a question because I have the ethics ordinance in front of me. And so, Gary, if you could identify what item in the ethics ordinance you're referring to, please?
I don't have it in front of me, but there is a provision that provides that all funding is determined by the town manager. In addition,
Wait, what?
Mr. Davies had made many comments in regard to ethics and attacking certain people. It was his donation was for a private purpose. Vermont Natural Resources Council, their donation fits the classic definition of a donation for a public purpose.
Okay, I think I do have the article here, which I'd like to read. This is Article 14, Gifts, Favors, or Special Privileges in Quasi-Judicial Proceedings, whether this relates or not, but I think the language is sort of interesting. It is the obligation of every public official on a public body with quasi-judicial authority to refuse personal gifts, favors, or special privileges of any value in any instance where the gift is or may be reasonably considered to be designed to influence or reward the actions of a public official. Now, if we take that public official to mean the select board, I mean a board, I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to.
No, it's not. I don't understand why you even brought that up.
Well, I'm just giving you language. It's in here. I certainly.
Yeah, you picked a provision that's not applicable.
Well, I suggested that there may be some connections there. I wasn't making any absolute statement.
I did want to respond, Dr. Metz. I was not on the board at the time that request. The select board, so.
There is similar language in Article 8 for non-quasi-judicial proceedings.
So why don't we let Ken ask his question? If that's fair, Mr. Chair.
And Linda has one too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. It's 3 minutes per person, and we're way over. So go ahead.
Does this one work? Is
Is
this okay?
he okay?
Yeah, that one's fine. Okay. So I've got a question relative to the action of the last meeting where the board voted to accept this donation. First of all, I want to sympathize with the board as a whole. I don't think anyone, or almost no one in Shelburne, is happy with having the railroad with this massive salt operation here in Shelburne. I don't think virtually anyone is happy with it. There may be a few people, but in general, we're not happy with it. The concern is, what should be done and how should it be done? So I've got a question or two. We've had, before the question, just let me sort of set the stage. We've had 2 shots appealing the ruling on what was a relatively narrow facet of what the railroad operation is, which was the ordinance that addressed hazardous material. And in 2 times, it went to appeal, and 2 times with an extremely experienced, extremely highly regarded judge, summarily dismissed with very clear findings of fact and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't go through all that stuff in an articulate way, but after reading the, I think it's 30 pages of the last one, it was very clear that the case was not made at all for continuing this case. Now, we're all concerned with the railroad and what's happening there. So the question is, it's not sort of, are we pro and con for the railroad? That's not the issue. I think all of us are concerned with the railroad, with the noise, with the potential pollution. But is it prudent to go in that direction? And as we do that, essentially facilitate the railroad continuing to do anything without any coaching or communication from the town? Is there a more effective way of doing it? Looking back at the legal cases again, did our legal team, after 2 times in a row, properly guide us to go ahead with a 3rd attempt? And this time, going down to New York City, where probably $20,000 as a gift will be gobbled up in a very short order and probably go beyond that. Does it make sense? So I'd like to ask, the last meeting, as soon as that vote was taken, virtually anyone that voted for that particular proposition instantly left the room, preventing any kind of questioning and dialogue as to why they did it. So I would like to ask, after all, you're a 5-member board, each one of you equally responsible to the town, not just the chair, each one of you as 5 people equally responsible for the town. I believe that it's not unfair to ask you each individually, starting from my left to the right, what is your justification for doing what you've done with that particular vote? And number two, given the situation we're in, and probably the reality that we're in, would you consider revoting this thing, rethinking it? Thank you.
Okay, just from a procedural standpoint, Ken, you went over 3 minutes. We're under 10 minutes. And in addition, this was an item that was voted upon at the last meeting. There was a call for a discussion by the public. The public had the opportunity to say something.
I think there was.
Everyone who wanted to speak could have spoken.
Well, okay, well, maybe they didn't. Maybe I was too dumb to ask the question then. I'm not now. And I would think it's not unreasonable for each one of these board members here, including yourself, sir, but not just you, every other one, because you're 5 co-equals. You're not just one chair and 4 people that follow along with you. 5 co-equals. What is your justification for doing this? And would you consider readdressing this issue?
Okay,
How about you, Jamie?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you have to address the recusal before you even get into talking about details on this.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Over time was here.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're
that
over
was,
time.
sorry, but that was quite a speech. That was a long time.
Well, I mean, I'm not the only one that makes speeches here. Sir, I've asked a question, and I would like the courtesy of an answer.
I think it's a fair question, Ken. I mean, I would be happy to provide my rationale for my vote, and I've thought about it, and I intend to do so. Not right at this moment, but I do think it's a fair question, keeping in mind that there is an aspect of this dialogue that's privileged, right? So there's a way to sort of communicate one's position and keeping it at a high conceptual level. And I do intend to do that. But I think putting someone on the spot like this is tough. You know, we're in the middle of, we amended the agenda to continue a conversation on this topic. So there are ongoing conversations that are happening amongst the board.
You are considering a revote on this? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying there's a continued conversation that is on the agenda to discuss. So with that, I would say I will be providing my rationale, but I can't speak for the 3 other members of the board.
I'm asking you just to speak for yourself. I think each one of us, when we're elected or when we're appointed even to a board, has responsibility to yourself.
I agree.
And
I think
therefore
it's a fair
responsibility
question.
individually to, the residents of Shelburne.
So can I say something?
Sure.
So I agree with you too that people would like to know why did I vote on a certain way, and it's certainly not because I'm beholden to any one particular person, but actually the reason that I made the decision that I made wasn't because of my own personal feelings. It was because of a responsibility I felt to what I felt was the majority of the residents of Shelburne wanting a desired effect. And I understand the people here, but you guys aren't the only ones here.
No, but we're here.
I know you're here.
I would suggest, madam, that the responsibility is for you, what you think is right, not
Right.
what you think the wind is blowing on.
No, and you're implying that I'm doing it because I'm looking for a future vote, and I'm not. I'm doing it because of a sense of responsibility for the people who voted me in the position in the first place.
How about the others?
But you take everybody in consideration, and everyone here feels that they represent a faction, and they have to vote to their conscience. And so Jerry feels like he represents a faction, and it's not the same faction that I represent. You asked me a question.
If that's the way you're serving on the board, that's improper. I think when you're serving on the board, whether someone voted for you or voted against you, you're responsible for each one of the 7,000 residents of Shelburne.
Right, and if some want red and some want blue, then what do you do?
I don't think neither you nor I really understand where the majority is on this. I would be presumptuous to say, well, I think I'm in the majority. I don't know. But what I'm saying is what's proper, what makes sense, what's the best way to basically deal with the railroad without basically dragging this out probably for
Jerry,
another year right now.
do you want to say anything, Jerry? Jerry, do you have any comments on this? I want to give you an opportunity. I find this to be completely improper, way over the time limit. and
Maybe
should have been
sometimes,
asked when
Mr.
there was a
Chair,
public
maybe sometimes,
discussion
Mr.
about
Chair,
it.
maybe sometimes, Mr. Chair, we should go over the time limit and you should listen to other
And
people.
we have many times, Mr. Albert. Many times we've
I
gone over
think,
the limit.
Mr. Chair,
to the-
again,
to
you're
the
not,
extent
Mr.
of
Chair,
2
again,
hours.
you're not listening. Please listen.
No, you're not listening.
Gary, I think you
All right,
misunderstood.
Jerry.
I think
Jerry,
you
Jerry, If you'd like
misunderstand.
to respond, go ahead.
I think you misunderstand the value of this discussion. I don't hear any of my colleagues regretting or unhappy about participating in it. It seems to me it's a discussion we should have had a long time ago and one that we should have in a continuing way to the degree it can be held, respecting privileged communications and the situation of the litigation. And I would as well caution all of us that given the fact that we're responding, it isn't useful and it doesn't contribute to the atmosphere to start to render your opinion by voice about someone who is rendering his or hers. What's fair is fair, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if we have an opportunity here to all talk together, we should be talking together and not discounting each other. Enough. My vote was negative, and it was negative for the two following reasons, which I'm happy to explore with you and would be happy to hear discussed at length at some other time. There are environmental impacts and there are risks to the environment of this facility and its operations. There is no doubt about that. The question has always seemed to me to be how to address them, how to minimize, if not prevent them. And it seemed to me that at this point in time, we are better addressing these impacts and these risks by other than continuing litigation. It seemed to me that there was, at this time, a necessary opportunity to contact the railway, excuse me,
I think it was.
to contact the railway and see if there could not be some meeting of the minds, some attempt to sit down with parties that have mutual interests. We're all Shelburne here. And see if there isn't going to be some path forward that could address such matters as noise, which are not addressed in the appeal, not addressed in the litigation, and won't be, unless they're introduced independently of it, such as traffic safety matters as they may be, or lighting as they may be. It seems to me enough has been learned to this point that we have not succeeded in addressing these issues, nor do we seem to have much opportunity for another lengthy period of time to do so. That's why I voted against. And as a third matter, I have still some concerns about the acceptance of monies for purposes that the town decides are its genuine activity. And it might be summed up by saying that if you believe strongly in what you want to do and vote to do so, you should pay for it. And you should not make the decision based on somebody else paying for it, whose agenda, while it may be institutional, is nevertheless private. And however elevated and important the moral purpose of that donation, it remains in the interest of those making it to advance an environmental agenda, you might say. However moral that purpose, it's a private purpose. And that may be, in its end, a third reason. And I thank you for your time.
And I will only say, as was noted in our review of the minutes, I have recused myself from this issue, so I won't speak at all, and certainly I didn't vote, but I would like to echo Ken's comment. which I truly believe that as elected officials, we always have have the responsibility to be able to speak about why a decision was made. I mean, that's what you elected us to do. That's our responsibility, is to take input, provide analysis, and make a best judgment. And you have the right to know why that judgment and why that decision was made.
Okay, it is 7:38. We've now taken 30 minutes approximately for a 10-minute item. Our next item is item 5, first reading for amendments to Shelburne's traffic ordinance and set a time date for second public hearing. Joe, you want to take this away?
Sure. So the first reading, do you, Gary, or someone on the select board want to read it? I think it's short enough to do this, to actually just read the amendment.
I thought I had it, Andy, but one of us probably had it.
I can read it, but do you want me to? Yes. Okay. Here we go. All right. So, speed limit ordinance amendment. I'm just going to read the whole amendment. It's short enough. It shouldn't take too long. The Select Board of the Town of Shelburne hereby orders that the speed limit ordinance is amended as follows. The maximum speed limit on Falls Road from its intersection with US Route 7 to its intersection with Church Street shall be 25 miles per hour. The maximum speed limit on Falls Road from its intersection with Church Street to its intersection with Marset Road shall be 30 miles per hour. The maximum speed limit on Marset Road from the intersection of US Route 7 to its intersection with Falls Road shall be 30 miles per hour. The maximum speed limit on Falls Road from its intersection with Marset Road to Thompson Road shall be 30 miles per hour. Those are the proposed amendments. I would recommend that we schedule a second hearing, well, if the board is comfortable with this, obviously, a second hearing and a second reading and a public hearing for February 13th.
My only comment was, we had met and talked about this once, and we had talked about how the state likes consistency and whether it all should be 25. Do you remember what happened after that?
No, I think that this is the right way to go. I think this is so right now, so basically all the amendments are 5 miles per hour less than where they sit currently. Okay, we've knocked 5 miles per hour off of these 4 sections of roadway. And at least I think that's what the understanding was, that this was the proposal. So, because currently, right now, the from Church Street, Falls Road from Church Street to 7 is 30.
30 and 35.
So we're taking what is currently 35 and reducing it to 30, what is currently 30 and reducing it to 25.
Right.
That's what these amendments, that's what this amendment does.
So it's consistent in as far as the percentage of decrease, but not just consistent in what it is geographically.
Yeah, I think it's consistent, though, if you look at the ordinance of where some of the, for the most part, 25 miles an hour is just for kind of cul-de-sac neighborhoods. So I think this is consistent with what the ordinance provides for across town.
Okay.
That's not true in Burlington, though.
Not true in Burlington.
Yeah. So is this consistent with the Village Safety Group's recommendation? Okay.
And there has been a review by the police department.
Yeah.
Who found this to be enforceable, which was a key factor.
So I think this is what the goal of the committee was, and of the board, and I think could probably do the hearing as early as January 23rd, but given budget and everything else, I would prefer the extra 2 weeks. I don't think that will harm anyone.
And just to confirm, we did the diligence with Legislative Council and
Yes.
Representative Brumstead
Yep.
signed off. Okay.
well, signed off
Well,
as much as
she's
anyone,
endorsed
as much as
the-
anyone can. We feel good. We
concept,
feel good
right?
that this is going to be legally enforceable. So yes.
Okay.
Okay, and you'd like to warn the public hearing for the 23rd?
13th, the second reading and public hearing for February 13th.
13th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I would have made that
I think it's critical that we, my thoughts on this is that it's critical that we go forward with this current board since we are all aware of what's gone in, and there more than likely is going to be a new board, and I don't want to have to start them up from scratch on this, so I'm in favor of this. Anybody else have any comments? All in favor?
Wait, hold on a second, Gary. There's
Aye.
somebody in the public.
Okay, please ask them to come up, speak, and identify themselves.
Susan McClellan, Falls Road. Obviously, one thing I'm worried about is the enforcing of whatever speed limit, because the reason we're here is because speed limits have not been enforced up until now. So are we going to have speed limit enforcement?
Again, I want to just say, and I know that's not way. So we typically have two or three police officers on duty at any time. They can't be all over town all
I
at the same
understand
time,
that.
and I know that you're not suggesting that.
understand
So I'll just cut to the chase and say, look, I get it. We do have very limited resources, and we do our best
And you
to.
think lowering the speed limit will really make that much of a huge difference?
I'd like to think that
I would like to
most
think
people
so,
are
too.
law-abiding citizens.
The other thing, really, the other thing I'd like too is I would like a component where, like the fire department goes into the schools and does education, I would like this safety committee to go into the schools and do some education there too. I think tonight on our way down to this meeting, there was someone crossing the street dressed in black. There was also a bicyclist with no reflecting lights or anything. I mean, I do believe as a driver, as a cyclist, and as a walker, it's more component than just the vehicles. I think we all need to be educated on pedestrian safety. Thanks.
Draft budget we have now, it's not just enforcement. There is some funding where that turns out, we'll see. For not for education, but for other physical changes that will hopefully make drivers aware of the.
We do have
of that.
crosswalks that cars aren't stopping and
That's true, and I think some of these changes try to deal with that issue.
Okay, should we call for a vote?
All right, we're done with the comments?
I think so.
Right. All right, great. All in favor?
Aye.
That was unanimous, right?
Yes.
All right, no roll call vote then. Next item is item number 6. Review town manager's proposed fiscal year 2019 Shelburne town budget and consider warning a public hearing for January 16th. Joe, why don't I turn this over to you?
I can give everyone the bad
Just
news.
one.
Again, I want to, before we get going, I really want to thank all the staff and the board and everyone who has been involved in this point, especially Peter Frankenberg and second Ann Janda. As I've said, the town charter requires that the town manager deliver a budget to the select board 45 days prior to the annual town meeting, which would be like the end of January. And it's a big heavy lift for staff to do this work a month ahead of schedule. And we do that so the board has more than 3 full weeks to look at it and make any modifications. So it's a real tip of the cap to everyone that's been involved to date. Although the board may not be excited about what it sees in the budget, I hope you do feel good about the information and the way it's presented, and feeling like you can make decisions based on real information and not kind of on fuzziness. So, like I said, I think of any of the budgets I've put together over a dozen years in municipal management, this has certainly been the most difficult. The budget as presented right now has a 9% tax rate increase, and that was with already a substantial amount of cuts that we've had to do internally, and that certainly may not be the end of the cuts. I think that there's going to be contradictory feelings among the board and the public. One feeling is that that's way too high, it needs to be reduced, and then the other feeling is going to be everything was cut or underfunded or unfunded compared to what the request was. So there's kind of a tension here about how to feel about the budget. About half of the tax rate increase is due to new debt service, both for the beginning of the principal payments on the Quint and then the start of the debt service that will become due on the library. The other significant impact on the budget are wages and benefits for the police and dispatching bargaining unit. All told, those three items represent 80% of the 9% increase. To put the 9% in perspective, that is 3.5 cents, estimated 3.5 cents on the tax rate. So that will mean an increase, if passed, of $35 more per $100,000 of assessed value for each of the property taxes. And that, of course, does not include the school portion, which is 80% of the total tax bill. And the tea leaves from Montpelier aren't necessarily the best news for where the education portion of the tax rate is going. So there's that. As I've mentioned to the board, and I sent this note out to all the department heads and people who are involved in our commission boards and committees. Look, I think if the board is basically satisfied with this budget and says, hey, Joe and Peter, just find us another half a cent and we'll be happy. I'm pretty sure Peter and I can squeeze blood out of a rock and find you half a cent savings in this budget. I feel confident. Anything more than that, if you're looking at a cent would mean is about $150,000 in the budget. If you're asking for a cent decrease to this budget, you are seriously then talking about a reduction in services. And that's just the matter of fact. And I think that maybe when a budget is this kind of drastic in the increase, it becomes a real conversation of, does this community feel satisfied with the level of services that's being provided? 24/7, 365 police, well-maintained roads, both winter and summer, rec programs, library services, fire services, the whole suite of public services that the municipality provides. Are these the services that taxpayers want and are willing to pay for? Or is it becoming too much and there needs to be a change in the amount of services or the way that services are provided? And it's not an unrealistic question to ask. I don't know if we'll be able to solve that in the next 3 weeks, but certainly over the next year or two, that may be a real conversation that this board or a future board needs to have. So that's my introduction to the budget that's here. It's online. I gave an introductory budget presentation for all those that were here about a month ago, and really the budget hasn't changed all that drastically, quite frankly, from the budget that the select board got a month ago. But there will be another a little more full presentation next week at the budget hearing. But that's the long and the short of it. So, look, this is a team effort. I'm handing it over to the board here, but I don't want anyone to think that this is like, oh, the town manager versus the board or versus the public or anything. Hey, this is a team effort. We started this in July. By this time in the budget process, I'm quite frankly pretty sick of the budget, and I forget that everyone else is just getting warmed up. But this is a long process. It's a team process. And, we have the next 3 weeks to hopefully work together and look for solutions, and not look for problems, but look for solutions. And I look forward to working with the board and the public and to do the best we can before the budget needs to be warned on January 23rd for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. What I'd like to do is give everyone on the board an opportunity to first just make a general comment about the budget, hopefully 30 seconds each, and then we'll delve into it to address anything that anyone on the board would like to address. So who wants to go first? Okay, hearing none, I'll go first. Oh, go ahead, Colleen. Go ahead.
No, just
Go
to
ahead.
thank Joe and Peter and the rest of the staff for putting this together. It's just seems like a monumental task every single year, and I'm always impressed when we get this at how much thought and detail goes into it. And we've had hours and hours to review and to meet and discuss, and there's always things that I'd love to be able to add, and I just don't know where to subtract.
Thank you. Anyone else have a general comment? Okay, hearing none.
Jerry's
Go ahead, please. Jay.
I'll make a general comment, and that's to second what Colleen said. In my own experience, this is a pretty extraordinary effort, beyond what might have been expected, and it should be recognized as such. The narration in particular that we've been provided, the level of detail department by department to expenditures that approximate $500 is a pretty extraordinary accomplishment, given the magnitude of all of it. And I think several things we all want. We're all taxpayers, and we're all going to pay more. And I think the best way to proceed is to acknowledge right at the start that you're looking at north of 10% likely once the school numbers are known. The school numbers are not going to be reduced, and they're going to simply add. School's 80%. So the school numbers tend to drive the total. And I think the other comment that could be made is that we've, as a community, obligated ourselves in voting for the fire truck and for the library to a pretty significant mortgage on budget, which wouldn't take long to show up, and in fact hasn't. For those of you who are close readers, by the way, the 80% figure of total tax rate increase attributable to the two bonds and to the collective bargaining agreement backs out the $250,000 for ambulance, which is not a tax impact. So if you've made the mistake like I did already, I can help you understand that it is in fact 80%. 80% of this increase is attributable to three items. 80% of our budget is attributable to school, over which there's no control whatsoever on this table. That all being said, my personal feeling is it's going to be very difficult, short of some wholesale changes which would be reflective of reductions in level of service, to achieve anything like even half a cent, which would be roughly 75 grand. There are some obvious things. All being friends, I wouldn't want to nominate all of them right now. There's time for that. There are some cuts that are more likely than others, but you shouldn't feel that this is simply a matter of applying some knife. You're talking about a major reduction in town commitments and levels of service to achieve anything like a significant increase of, say, 2% or 3% versus the 4%, much less dealing with the almost 4.5% that comes from the obligations. I think the most helpful thing, if there is going to be conversation about reducing levels of service, which at this point in our town history, maybe there should be, those are going to take some time. They ought to take time. They ought to involve many of us in open sessions and get-togethers. They involve putting some material together of an analytic sort that none of which could likely occur in the next 2 weeks. But if you do feel that we are at the point as a community where we should be looking seriously or questioning levels of service, then I would certainly personally want to encourage that effort over a period of time in advance of next year. Next year, the mortgage from debt expenditures is going to be even greater. That said, I thank you again, Joe and Peter and Ann, and all of the department heads who contributed to this. You can be assured, as bad as the news might be, it is not coming out of nowhere. It is a very carefully constructed and substantiated document, this budget. And I greatly appreciate the effort that went into it.
Thank you, Jerry. Jenny and Josh, you got something?
Okay. Yeah, and I would like to compliment Joe on his summary of this. I think he really wrapped this up really well. Certainly when I saw this budget, I was like stunned. Not just because of the increase in the rate from last year, but with the recognition, as Jerry says, with the potential school increase, and we're looking at, potentially 15% and over. It just struck me about how are people going to deal with this? I mean, there may be some people in the town that it doesn't matter at all, but I think we have to realistically understand that no, that's not the same for everyone, and we really have to take this all seriously, that this kind of budget increase is not something to be taken lightly. That said, after, as has already been said, after you sit and look at the numbers and you say, okay, well, the citizens have voted for half that increase, and that's not something you can do about. I think there was a very good job done with the negotiation for the police contract, but that is another part of this. So the reality is there's really not very much wiggle room. And sure, as you go through the budget, you can say, okay, well, we don't have to do this, we don't have to do this, but you're not talking about anything that really makes a significant difference. And if you look at, it's like a family budget. It's like, okay, are you going to go out to eat again this week? I mean, there's all these things that you can make decisions about. But if, as has been said, if you're looking about a significant change, it's going to be really hard to do that. And as I said, it's the services that are the big ticket item. The new library is a big ticket item. All right. We still don't have the complete budget on where that's going to be, but that's we know that is going to go for a long time, as well as the debt on the fire trucks. So, as Jerry says, it's like, okay, we are beholden to the voters to sort of look at this and say, okay, what are our choices? So that's why we really want feedback and saying, okay, what do you want? Because at the end of the line, on March 6th, on March 6th, you're the ones who are going to have to make that choice. And is this a budget you want or not? Not makes it a lot more difficult, but still, certainly there have been expenditures that might have filled in the gap here, but it's not something we can do anything about at the moment. So I think I really, being sort of saying, okay, I'd really like to hear any ideas or what thoughts people have, just because that's all we have to work with. I mean, we can look at the numbers and we go, gosh, what do we do? So that's where I am, and so if anybody has good ideas, and as Joe said, it really is, if you think about this as a household and as a team, you're all members of the household. And so everybody has a say about what we should do.
Jamie, you got any general comments?
Just 2 quick minutes. When I put my hand up for this role, I can tell you that I didn't appreciate the magnitude of the decisions that have been presented in 6 weeks, the budget being a big one. First go around on this, there's a lot of information, and I applaud the whole team that put this together. It's just it's a ton of work. It's a wonderful presentations by the entire town staff and CBC heads, and it's a lot to soak in, and tough decisions. So I think it goes without saying that I've been in a lot of budget meetings, and it's prioritization, and I think I'm trying to just take a pulse check and get input from the community as well, as Josh said, on what the priorities are, and understanding how people think about investments versus expenses as well is important in my mind, and there are certain categories that I'm trying to just frame up as, these tend to be more investment category versus pure expense. So with that, I just, again, thank the team and look forward to more input on this.
Thanks, Jamie. My quick comments are Joe, Peter, and Ann, another great job. People who don't realize over the last 4 years since Joe has come on, the budget process has been very open and transparent, but more, in addition, it's been faster. It's come to the select board sooner. There's been more discussions throughout staff. Joe has really brought a wonderful way of dealing with the budget that I think has been well received. In addition to the 80% that were the fire department with the Quint, the library building, and the police contract, which, by the way, is also matched by all other employees who are not subject to the collective bargaining agreement. People should be aware of that. But in addition, there was another mandate that was put upon the town that we have no choice but to address, and that's stormwater. And when you add the stormwater, that's not only 80%, it brings us closer to being a level funded budget. I think Jerry makes a great point in regards to having a discussion about level of service. This is something that has been brought up for every year of the last 9 years to a certain degree. Some people look at the number one ticket item in regard to level of service. That's the police department, and the level of service being 365/724. I'll let you know that I have always been, and I still am, fully supportive of a 365/7-day, 24-hour police department. But I think Jerry has a very reasonable point that it should be a level of discussion in the future. So everybody had their general comments, some longer than others. Joe, would you like to, or members on the board, are there any items in specific that you'd like to discuss?
The only one in particular that I'd like to discuss, because I think there's a lot of interest in this, is there was a request by the Ethics Committee for a $10,000 appropriation. That is not in the budget at the moment. What I would suggest in that, so as to not raise the budget, last year we did increase the legal budget, and the Ethics Committee request was for legal expenses. So what I would suggest is that $10,000 actually be partitioned off of the $60,000 current legal budget, since, as been discussed, our legal expenses aren't going to be as great this year. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, and that way we don't have to get into the situation we were in recently about funding for the Ethics Committee, and that $10,000 would exist in the budget for the use of the Ethics Committee without prior approval.
Okay, anyone else have any thoughts on that?
mean, my thoughts would be that it seems like a high percentage relative to 60K. I'm not philosophically opposed, but I would just
Yep.
maybe ask that we think about the number and understand from Lee and others on the committee where they got that from. That's all. I don't recall him
Absolutely.
speaking in detail about
Yeah,
how he built it up from bottom up, but
that's reasonable.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll speak to one thing. We've had an opportunity, as some of my colleagues may not yet know, to sit with Joe and Peter and go through much of this in great detail. And they've been very receptive to listening to ideas and suggestions, and some of which we'll all share too. At risk of seeming to believe that we could add or subtract anything and it really wouldn't make a difference, there is an item that I'd like us to think seriously about ahead of the next meeting, and that is to retain the funding level for open space at its present. That's been reduced along with a number of other things. Jamie referred to investment. In a way, the bonds that have been approved and the cost of those are investments in our community, long-term investments. Can be seen as that more so than just out-of-pocket expenses 1 week. So too is, to my mind, open space. And as has been the case, that's subject to separate and public vote as it is. And I would be in favor of restoring that to its original request. It just seems to me an outlier here altogether with apologies.
Okay, can I just ask a clarifying question, Jerry? I think you asked to restore it, open space, and if restoring it, I think it was at 30,000 last year to 25 this year, but you also mentioned the request, and I think the request was 75,000. So are you suggesting 30?
I'm suggesting we restore it to last year's funding level.
Okay, which I think was 30,000, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's not a formal request of all of us. We're all going to have ideas the next time. It's just simply, it's on the top of my head at the moment. I think it's a little different, and I appreciate it as an investment in the town future.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I know the public wants to say something, but you know, what I'd want to tell the board is, and I've been purposefully avoiding Paul Goodrich in the hall all week. But you know, if you're going to put money back into the budget, the most difficult cut that I had to put into this budget was reducing the paving budget relatively substantially from $335,000, and actually the last 3 years we've tried to ramp that up a little bit because you know, the more that we're able to pave now, that's cost savings over the long term, so that the roads don't, you know, turn into mush, and you have to do a full reclamation. I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars, and Paul has done a fabulous job of doing shim and overlay and maintaining our roads that way. So, you know, taking that $35,000 out of paving, and there's certainly been cuts and unfunded things. Was certainly the most difficult one to swallow because, so if you're looking to put money back into the budget, I might suggest starting there and
Well,
then
it's the same point.
other
It's the
place.
same point of investment. And deferring is just going to be more costly, so, yeah.
So, it's a fair point.
All right, does anyone have any other points or comments they'd like to make? If not, on the board, want to give everybody and President an opportunity to speak on any of the items of the budget.
Sean Moran is coming to the mic, Gary.
Sean Moran, you're over.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question, I have a comment, thank you. I haven't seen the budget. I dread it because just putting together a budget for a show with costumes, props, and sets and all of that is daunting enough. I couldn't even imagine what you and Peter and Ann have tried to balance. I assume that when you make a budget, you want everybody to stick to their budget. If we have paving, if we have police, if we have fire, which I, as a taxpayer, pay on 2 properties. Obviously, they're not properties on the Shelburne farms, but it still hurts enough. I have to stick to my budget. As a taxpayer, I don't want any of those declined, or diminished. What I do want is I want the select board to stick to their legal budget. I know there's this great pot of gold called a discretionary fund somewhere hiding, I don't know, under third base over at the baseball field. You can tell I can really do sports, I know. Guys, we've spent an enormous amount, chasing a windmill here. It is time you stick to your budget and not go to the discretionary fund, which could be, it's not the addendum to the legal fund. It's a discretionary fund. It's to help those people with the sewer problems with crap in their first story. It's to help if we need extra crosswalks so people won't be hit coming out of church, at 5 o'clock at night when it's pitch dark on Falls Road. It's a discretionary fund. It's not the happy fund to let's go sue somebody else. I do appreciate everything you've done, but I wish you had a big ruler to go after some of these people who go over the budget and go, no, you can't do that anymore. Thank you all for listening.
Okay, is there anybody else?
Chris Boyd.
Okay.
Chris Boyd, Thomas Road. So, I would like to, first of all, Peter, Joe, nice job with the budget. It's difficult, there's no doubt, and it's not always going to come in flat. When it comes to major purchases, like with the library, it would always be good to know, there was some discussion, but there was more discussion about how much it was needed versus how much it was going to impact. Things like that, when it's going to come up and significantly affect the long-term budget, that clearly needs to be defined so taxpayers can get the full benefit of knowledge as far as what they're voting for. With this budget, I would challenge the board, and as you said, Jerry, this budget may be a little too late, but going forward, there's still going to be board members here. Going forward, put your mindset into a household income of $50,000 to $70,000 a year gross income, and how are you going to afford the impacts this budget is going to have on it, and what can you do to minimize it? I realize the school's nothing you've got control over, but this you do, and maybe it's time this board starts having some discussions with the school board, and overall try and both get the mindset so that the impact to the taxpayers is as prudent as possible. Thank you.
Okay, we got anybody else? No, there's no one else?
No.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Anyone on the board want to say something more?
Just that Jerry and Josh, were you guys on the board when the school board, when we passed the improvement to SES? When that happened? Yeah. And so I was on the board at that point, and so Chris, to your comments about a conversation between the select board and the school board, that when the school board first put that on for a bond, there was no discussion, and that was actually something that we did address with the school board. And prior to the actual passing of the bond, there was multiple discussions, and in the end, it really was two parties that the school board felt that they were doing what they needed to do. And as the select board, we really were more in a position of having to react to that. But we chose to use that as an avenue to approach our state legislature about exactly how the state does do the funding and what comes out of Shelburne versus what comes back into it. And we all know that we subsidize a lot of the rest of the state. But when it comes time for our community to need a new school and to need a new roof, then that means we have to come up with additional money. The state doesn't come back with it for us to have that new building or that new roof. And so those discussions have been started, and that's something that we'll continue to communicate with our Representative Brumstead and Webb for sure. And she's very aware of it, and she was at least Representative Brumstead was when she attended the last select board meeting in which we discussed this. So I absolutely agree with you.
Thanks.
All right.
The only thing
I'd like to say is as much as I'm pained about the potential impact of this budget, I'm actually just as pained that we only have two people who've been willing to give us some suggestions. And so I recognize that a lot of people are not necessarily comfortable speaking in front of a group. So I really would urge all of you and any of you, if you have any suggestions, any thoughts, please communicate with the select board. If you don't want to communicate with the whole select board, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Because I think we really need that kind of feedback as to what you're thinking, because it's not our budget. It's all of our budgets. And that is, we need to have that interaction and that information. So, thanks. Now, Gail has a problem.
All right.
We have one more comment.
I'll take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Jerry for what you said about the Natural Open Space Fund. And just to sort of remind everybody here in the audience that that is something that is discretionary to the public on Election Day. And so knowing the impact of forests, for instance, on stormwater mitigation, I'd urge you to think well about Jerry's suggestion. From probably 10 or 15 years now, we have asked for much more than has ever been granted for the natural resource, for the Open Space Fund. And we've done that. Not only have we asked for more than has been granted, but we have asked for less than we thought was actually necessary in order to be able to protect lands like the land that the railroad was on. So I would just urge you to give the town the opportunity to make their choice for the Open Space Fund, since that does become a ballot item, and to at least follow Jerry's suggestion that you put some money back into it. Thank you. And thank you again, as everybody else has said, to Peter and Joe and Ann and everybody else who's contributed to the budget making. It's not something I'd like to do.
Okay, are there any other comments? No. Anyone else on the board have something else they want to say on this?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, let's have a motion then. I'd entertain a motion to warn a public hearing on the town budget for the fiscal year 2019 for January 16th.
So moved. Jerry moved.
Okay, could you?
Seconded.
Jerry moves, seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Next up is item 7, discuss proposed bus transit route changes with Green Mountain Transit. Joe, what do you got?
All right, so I think we have representatives here today from Green Mountain Transit. Saw Teddy Bear somewhere here. Day school? No, you're not. Day school, okay. And maybe Waldorf is here, I'm not sure who else. So this came to our attention. Green Mountain Transit used to be CCTA? Can't keep them all straight. Is looking at changing its routes, not just in Shelburne, but in its entire service district. And some of the routes that may be impacted are the route on Route 7, obviously, and the potential fallout of that or change to that would mean a different bus schedule for some of the schools that have kids that are coming from outside of Shelburne, and also for Teddy Bear that relies on a lot of workers that come from north of Shelburne, I think, typically. So this is a discussion item. I think there may be a reason and an opportunity in the future. It may not be before town meeting. I'm not sure actually what the time frame is, but for the select board to take a formal position at some point. Tonight's not that point, so I think you can kind of relax and just get the information as presented. So maybe it makes sense to start with Mark, with the general manager of Green Mountain Transit, who can introduce this and talk about what the changes are proposed to be.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So my name is Mark Seuss. I'm the general manager from Green Mountain Transit. Again, Mark Seuss from Green Mountain Transit. I'm the general manager. On your desk, we sent an email to Joe with a memo kind of explaining the position of the route changes. Let me kind of back step a little bit here. For about a year, we've been doing a study called the Next Gen. It started with a comprehensive service analysis, which we haven't done in, I think, since probably when we started. We have not done a full comprehensive service analysis of our 5 counties that we serve. And so the suggestion was, and presented to our board, was that we would have somebody come in that's an international, basically, transit consultant that would come in and kind of look at our service routes, trips, everything from, like I said, the 5 counties from St. Albans all the way down to Berlin and Washington County. And then also look at the fare analysis, but that's a secondary item. And so by doing that, they then come in, they actually take an analysis, look at algorithms, put them all together. They have formulas that they use, and basically we're trying to be to make it more efficient and to utilize the dollars that we do get to further along either increase service. Sometimes there's recommendations that decrease service. But at this point and stage, it's really only at a recommendation phase. They really haven't come up with the finalized document. What this does is allows them to literally take, and for this instance, this route, and basically look at all the numbers, look at the times, look at the boardings, and then basically put it all together and in their professional mind come back to us and say, here are our thoughts, here are our scenarios. There's 3 scenarios that you might want to look at, but this is far from over because there's still some ridership. We are actually are going to ride check, so we actually will put somebody on the bus that will actually physically write down each boarding, which will give us a real hard number. So there's still more to come, so to speak. So when Joe had kind of got, we have some emails that had gone back and forth, and some of the recommendations, there was some concern. I assure you that this is, far from being over as far as a final recommendation. So I would like to introduce, first off, Dennis Barton. I'm sure you all know he's on our Board of Commissioners from Shelburne. And then I'd like to introduce John Moore. He's our Director of Planning, and he's been actually in charge of this project from day one. So I'll let John kind of come up and talk about, actually the Shelburne recommendations and some comments emails that were sent around, and give him some numbers and maybe answer some questions from all of you and maybe from the audience.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So good evening, everybody. So I'll start by saying this was a multi-step project. The first step was our consultant team came in. They did a technical analysis of all of our routes. So for the Shelburne number 6 route, which travels on Route 7, it's kind of confusing. For the most part, they suggested a lot of general improvements, more frequent service, later evening service, service on Sunday. I think a lot of positive benefits to the community. We're looking at trade-offs during this project to try to keep things as cost neutral as possible. One way to do that is, if you're going to add service, is to reduce service in other areas. During their technical analysis, they found that there were some service deviations in Shelburne, most notably to the Waldorf School, Vermont Teddy Bear, and then Vermont Day School, which is adjacent to the Teddy Bear, that had low to zero ridership. And then the deviation length really increased cost based on that ridership level. I will say we've had a lot of feedback from mostly Vermont Day School parents, as well as the Vermont Teddy Bear. So we've rechecked our numbers. We did find that there was some flawed ridership data in the original technical analysis. So based on that, as Mark alluded to, we did do an in-depth ridership study the week of December 1st for 7 days. And we found the ridership to be quite a bit higher, as the memo will show. So based on those findings, we're going to reanalyze what the original suggestion was. As Mark said, right now they're just suggestions. Before any changes are officially made, we'll go through another public hearing process to get community feedback. But at this time, kind of based on the updated ridership, we'll work with our consulting team to try to find the balance of providing the service to some of those locations that were originally proposed for elimination versus the service for the other 725 trips that are made daily on that route. So as Mark said, no decisions have been made. Next step of the process will be some more municipal outreach, stakeholder outreach, and then we'll finally develop a final service recommendation, or the consultant team will with our input. Once that is developed, we will still go out to a public hearing prior to any schedule changes being implemented, which would be ultimately approved by the GMT board, which Dennis Barton is the representative for Shelburne. So I think the summary at this point is we've done some more analysis. We'll adjust our initial recommendations and suggestions based on that ridership data, and then we will come up with a final recommendation and present that to the community. So with that, do you want to add anything, Dennis?
No, I think that up to this point we're still early, and I appreciate the fact that this has been very.
I'm so sorry. Do you mind using the microphone only so other people
So I
can hear?
appreciate the fact that up until this point it's been an open process. We're just early in the analytical results, but the plan itself, the scenarios are all on our website. They're all available. We've done a public outreach plan. We continue to want to do that over the next few months before this even comes before the board for final approval. So I think it's good to have this discussion at this point with the communities. The fact that we're having discussion is I think is important at this step in the process. And I'd be glad to offer more opportunity for input, whatever the board and members of the public want to say about this issue.
I certainly want to make sure that the day school and Teddy Bear have an opportunity to talk about what the impacts could be, and whomever else.
Does anybody else in the public want to? Ken Albert would like to say something.
Okay, great.
First of all, thank the Transit Authority for what it's. We have a business that's just south of Marset and Marset Road on Route 7, and our employees are highly dependent on the transit system. So we thank you for what you're providing. Just an observation. The Teddy Bear, which is a little bit further south from us, is quite a bit of a hike from the last stop on Route 7, which is in front of the museum. And in the winter as well as in the summer, you see people literally trudging to get from that Route 7 Marset Junction all the way down to the Teddy Bear. And if it would just be trudging without any danger, I'd say, well, maybe okay. But there's really no margin on the road there to walk. And in the winter, it's not clear exactly where you can walk without being actually in the driven roadway. So anything you can do to help that situation, I think, would be, highly, highly beneficial to that particular, I guess, percentage of our population.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We have looked at that over the time that I know I've been here. One of the main issues for when we put a stop somewhere is safety becomes the very first thing that we look at. Safety as far as where we can put a bus stop, what's the speed limit within that bus stop, and what's the kind of the eye view of where any turns or anything like that. So to your point, we have looked at that over several times, and sometimes the recommendations come that it's just not safe in certain areas. And if there were a great spot, we would love to put one there because we totally agree with that. So safety is the very first thing we looked at, and we look at it every stop, and that's throughout the system. That's up in Stowe, that's everywhere we go. So safety is the very first when we put a bus stop in.
This is Gary Bunstage. I'd just like to jump in here and support Ken's comment. I live on Richfield Road, a little south of where Ken's shop is, and I see these people on that road all the time walking at night. It is, I think, the most dangerous situation in Shelburne. So, but I also believe this is more than just a Green Mountain Transit issue. This also involves the state and doing something with the right-of-ways there.
And I would say the next step of this next gen, is the municipal outreach. So this is where my staff and John and his group meet with the towns and the cities and actually their planning departments and their staff and actually go through steps and some suggestions from the staff, like who knows their town better than staff. And so that's our next phase right now. So we plan on scheduling a meeting with the town of Shelburne and their planning staff and DPW and sometimes fire and police, just to have a conversation to see what their recommendations are or their thoughts, and things like this come up. So the next phase is to meet with the municipal, all of our communities. So.
Yeah, because I definitely remember within the last 4 years, like having this exact conversation about adding another stop specifically in that southern gateway. And there's that, is it a hotel or a motel that's down there? And seeing, you know, mothers with strollers and holding the hands of like small toddlers on a very busy highway, trying to get to that, basically walking to get to a bus stop. So yeah, I think we appreciate any and all communication.
That discussion. Absolutely.
Okay. We have Bill Schuldeis. Is that correct?
My name is Bill Schuldeis. I'm the president and CEO of Vermont Teddy Bear. And I just want to say thank you. I challenge my team every day when we're building budgets, looking at level of service, is to look for partnerships. Not big on vendors. Vendors look to wring the last nickel out of the deal, and they're looking for more probably service than they deserve. So having sat through this meeting and listened to some of the struggles that this town is looking at is probably no different than many other towns. And, you know, when Joe first came on board, we sat down with Gary and we talked about what Teddy Bear could do for stormwater runoff, because we have a sizable parcel of land up there with adjacent to some waterways that maybe there's something we can do there. We've participated in the bike path, the pedestrian paths from the intersection that we're talking about, including tying into the multi-tenant park that's up there, and how we could do that and give the land to the community to see that would happen. And really, I think the most important part is really there's 2 Vermont Teddy Bears, which I'm glad that you guys have taken the time to look at the ridership, because during the summertime, there's about 120 of us up there. And this year I hired 721 people during the busy season, which will stay in force from basically Thanksgiving, which is when most retailers start their ramp, and we're no different than that. And it's really all the way through Christmas, and then we, of course, have a Valentine's Day push, and then we have a smaller Mother's Day push. And we represent not only Vermont Teddy Bear, but Pajama Graham, Pajama Jean, and Vermont Brownie Company. And so what I'm looking for is a level of service that really can be defined by the level of demand and need. Maybe at one time in the year, that window I'm talking about, it looks like one thing. And then another time, when it's just 120 cores, it looks like something else. And if it means that we have to partner with schedules of when shifts start and stop to maximize that ridership and promote that, you know, I'm willing, and I think Joe knows, and certainly Gary knows, who I don't know if the town knows, but I've been hanging around with Gary for 30 years, and boy, I don't think many of you have, so please wish me well as we enter this next conversation. But I'm willing to sit down and work on this. It's the people that are taking that bus, and as you probably heard my ads this year, I was offering $18 for second shift and $15 to start. It's a vitally important part of their socioeconomic well-being to be able to take that bus and do it in a safe manner. So I just want to be on the record of saying thank you. And if there's something that we can do at Vermont Teddy Bear to be better at what we're doing in terms of helping you to maximize ridership and provide a level of service that's safe and fair, then I hope we can have that dialogue.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sage Bagnato. I am the head of school at Vermont Day School, and thank you all for coming this evening to talk about the issue and inform the select board. And I know our parents and teachers really appreciate the blog that you have available. We've made a lot of comments there. I'm sure you've referred to them, you've seen them. And thank you to the Select Board for hearing this and hopefully taking a stance. I was really glad to see this addendum and that you were able to do a more current analysis of ridership. Our school is new. We started in 2015 with 12 students, and within about a month of school, one of our parents contacted CCTA to see if they could add a stop right in front of our school. So at that time, it was just going directly up to Vermont Teddy Bear, and CCTA responded incredibly swiftly and quickly, and once DigSafe was there and cleared the space to have a stop put in, it was put in, and we've been really grateful for that. We currently, in our third year, we have 34 students. We're a growing school, and our daily ridership is 11 students riding from Burlington. They got on in 2 stops in the Burlington area. And just looking at these numbers, I just want to point out, I know obviously you just need to conduct a study to get an average. The number here being an average suggests that there's 7.2. 0.2 of a student arriving. I know it's an average. Yes.
Play, but yeah.
But if I just quickly pulled out my calendar, but it does look like it incorporates 2 weekends. Obviously, we're not in school during that time.
So we didn't, those weekends we didn't.
Oh, you didn't track. Okay, I was going to say that would have skewed the data.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. So perhaps for the record, of course it's going to vary from day to day with student absences and whatnot, but typically we have 11 students that ride the bus each day. I welcomed them this morning off the bus. They love the bus. It's a great experience for them. It's obviously a huge convenience for the families. We serve students in Shelburne and as an independent school in many different towns, and this bus service allows these children to come. It's one of the, sorry. Okay.
There wasn't any of us.
Okay. I'll try and be a little more animated. And we expect that as our school continues to grow, we anticipate our enrollment will be about 45 students, that our ridership will continue to grow. Our students ride the bus, the morning bus, because it aligns with our start time. We aren't riding the afternoon times. However, similar, I'll echo Bill's sentiments that we would be very, very interested in having any ongoing conversations to see if there was a way to align our times, our dismissal times, et cetera, with the bus service times, so that there could be greater ridership in the afternoons. So, thank you.
Yeah, but I think we should follow up with that, because I'd like to have a conversation about your times. And
That would be
I'd like
great.
to know a little bit more, so you and I can probably get together and have a conversation. That'd be great.
Perfect.
And I think to maximize efficiency, if we get Teddy Bear involved in the conversation, I think there is some hopefully overlap on some of those schedules.
And it could be seasonal, right? We have seasonal service all over our system. So when you're busy in the Christmas time or that time frame, maybe we could look at doing something a little bit different. But maybe we should all get together and just have a conversation.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we had one more public comment. Dr. Metz?
This may be a silly question, but why must you use these huge buses? Could you not, theoretically, when you have stops that are not filling your buses, could you not use more economical, smaller buses for some of your runs?
Yeah, great question. Fleet utilization is something that's is high on our priority list. What happens sometimes is these routes not only do the Shelburne, but once they leave they do the Shelburne, then they'll go to the DTC, which is the Downtown Transit Center. They'll then go to do a Riverside in downtown Burlington, and then come back and do another route somewhere else, which could be very, could be pretty full. So sometimes it's the next run that could be utilized, the bigger buses. But fleet utilization is one of the board's priorities that we've been talking about, and that means possibly the smaller cutaways or even van service, where some of the services that we provide, maybe in the rural area, and then some routes that are not necessarily in our urban system, but like a Jeffersonville, where we know the number will get no higher than 5 on one run, then could we utilize a van in that service? So we're doing a fleet utilization now. So to answer your question, yes. But the reason sometimes you see the big, large 35s or 40-footers is because it's going to another route later on or did another route previous.
Okay, any other comments?
Or two. First, to say that this is certainly timely, because this is a $100,000 budget item for us, as you know. That's a significant expenditure. Secondly, I'd like to thank Joe and Dean for shepherding this our way, because at the start, this seemed quite alarming to me. And I'm really thrilled to know two things. One, that this study material, and I assume its methodology as well, is available publicly.
Oh, it's all online.
I was really interested to hear more about choice riders and other decision-making points that you employ to better understand the situation. And secondly, I'm couldn't be more appreciative of your willingness to meet with various players here, certainly the two prominent ones, where it seems we have some nexus already of some cooperative venture, even to the point of what might be nonlinear scheduling. I mean, even if it turned out to be a fairly special scheduling on a seasonal basis, it would seem that that's wonderful to hear about, and I would hope, I'm sure you're going to keep us posted about that. And as well, please understand that we have addressed some of this general concern with sidewalks, other traffic safety measures, and it would be very good to incorporate your smarts and your experience in some of those discussions. I know Jane and Tom have left, and most of the committee, Sarah's here, but that would be very useful, I think, in the particulars of those stops. So again, I thank you. I was much more alarmed at the start. I'm reassured in many, many ways, and appreciate the time and effort you've made to come and clue us in here.
Yeah, we appreciate you allowing us to be here. I think one theme that I heard earlier, it seems like John and I are always at budget meetings and when we come to these, but one thing I heard was transparency. Well, we're the same way, and if we can only be successful if our partners can be successful. So you're a partner of ours, and so for us, transparency is everything. That's why you go to that webpage, you're going to find every scenario, you're going to find everything. And there's a blog, and that blog is a feedback that we get, which we love, because then we hear from our constituents and our riders. So
thank you.
Anybody else on the select board?
Does everybody have a chance?
Yes.
Everyone have a chance to speak?
No?
Okay, great.
good.
Let's move.
I think you can move on to 8.
Great. 8 is consider approving applications to the UPWP program, Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Joe, want to give us your recommendation and tell us where we're at.
Okay, and Dean is here too, so I'll have him chime in. So I just, actually, this is kind of a funny year. I think Dean and I, for about an hour one day, were racking our heads and trying to come up with some projects to submit. I think by the time we got to some big study about driverless cars in Shelburne, I said, you know what? Not that it's not, it might be timely in the future, but I think that if it's that hard for us to find a project, we don't need to do projects just for the sake of doing projects. Regional Planning Commission is not going to hold it against us and say that we're slackers just because we're not doing projects. It will be a slight budget savings by not doing too many projects. So in the past, we've submitted, I put just for reference what we did last year, which was kind of in line with a few years before, asking for in the neighborhood of $50,000 worth of planning projects. this year, we're asking the select board to, it's actually a printout on your desk. If you have it, sorry, Gary, I might not have forwarded this in time to you, so I'll just read it out loud. The request is a motion to authorize the town manager to submit on the town's behalf the following requests for support under Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission's UPWP, which is Unified Planning Work Program. I don't know. An application to support the ongoing GIS mapping project for the 80 hours for a cost not to exceed $4,000, so much less than the $50,000 we typically try for. In the GIS mapping, maybe it's probably better to turn over to Dean just for 60 seconds to explain what we're trying to get out of this GIS mapping.
For the record, my thing is not autonomous vehicles, it's electric bicycles. So last year, and perhaps even the year before, as part of the slate of projects that the town submitted to the Regional Planning Commission, we requested support for GIS, Geographic Information System mapping. Pam Brangan, a Shelburne resident who is on the staff of the Regional Planning Commission, has been working with several staff members here to digitize, that is, convert from a non-digital state to a digital state, information about where water lines are, where sewer lines are, and as important, or if not more important, where the easements for those lines are. And I don't remember exactly how many meetings there were last year. They've kind of slowed down in the last few months. But the request really is to continue that work, but with also an added element which has to do with adding bicycle and pedestrian easements to the mix. The town is the holder of bicycle and pedestrian easements that it has acquired over the years as a result of development projects. Those are recorded in the land records, but they're not in a digital state. There was something about 15 years ago created that was called the Crayola map, and we would like to take it a step beyond what has been called the Crayola map. Happy to answer any questions.
Having spent a reasonable amount of time dealing with GIS projects, it's just like, it's invaluable. And that kind of, especially going forward in the future, that kind of technical tool is really where we need to go.
Okay.
Does anyone in the public have, no. Anybody on the select board have a comment? Okay, nobody has a comment on the select board, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Colleen. We're looking for a motion?
So move to approve the application to the WPWP program with the CCRPC. How do you want this worded, Joe? I don't have your...
The ongoing GIS mapping project for up to 80 hours for a cost not to exceed $4,000. The focus of the mapping would be utility easements and bicycle and pedestrian easements.
What he said. Jerry moved and Colleen seconded.
All right, that was a very unique motion procedure, but it's good. Any discussion?
Yeah, right.
Yes, it is.
Teamwork.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Great, thank you. Next item is item number 9, interview and consider appointments to commissions, boards, and committees. Joe, I didn't receive any materials on this, so why don't you tell us where we're at?
Yeah, so I think I emailed them around, hopefully.
Yeah, I received some emails.
Okay. So there's two, I'm a mess here. There's 2 applicants for the Planning Commission. I've got things all over the place here. 2 applicants for the Planning Commission, which is actually Jamie's former seat, and 1 applicant for the Social Services Commission. The seat on the Planning Commission is until 4/1/2018, I believe. 19. Let me check that. I have that written down somewhere. Planning Commission 4/1/2019. Oh, both, and actually the Social Service Commission is 4/1/2019 too. So that makes it easier. So the 2 applicants for the Planning Commission, I don't know if that's the way you want to start. One is Susanna. Is that what I'm saying? You're Susanna. And then the other one is Tom. So I don't know how you guys want to do this, but you guys interview.
Okay, so there's one position open, and we have two people applying for it?
Correct.
For the planning commission, yes.
All right. Let's start with the two people. Are they both present?
Is Tom here? Tom's here, and Susanna is here. So, am I saying that right?
Okay, why don't you invite them up one at a time?
Susanna, go for it.
You're in the front, you get to go first.
Susanna, if you could please tell us something about yourself and why you're interested in serving in this position.
Sure, thanks. I am Susanna Karist, and I've lived in Shelburne for 7 years. I've served on the library board, and I've been an active member at the school. Professionally, I'm the development director at King Street Center in Burlington, where I'm responsible for raising $1.2 million a year. I'm on the leadership team and do a lot of strategic planning and work very closely with our board. We recently finished a building, well, actually it was 3 years ago now, but I was part of a full building project that we oversaw at King Street Center. So the reason I'm interested in taking Jamie's vacant one-year position is really because of everything that was happening here tonight. Sort of the linkages between land and transportation and business and schools. I find all of that connection really, really fascinating. I think the Planning Commission has the luxury of sort of a 30,000 foot perspective, which I find is my sweet spot. And they also have the luxury of being proactive. And I think a little bit behind the scenes as planners. I know there's a deadline for the comprehensive plan, and that's something I would be privileged to be a part of. And I'm truly invested in Shelburne. We love it here. I think the vitality of this community is essential, both the diversity of housing and business and transportation and schools, and making sure that we are taking full advantage of our natural resources and appreciating them is and just so critical. And I think that the Planning Commission is full of forward-thinking, bright minds, and I'd appreciate having the chance to work side by side with them.
Thank you, Susanna. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Susanna?
It's Jamie. I thank you
Sure.
for applying, first of all. I'm really excited to see two people put their hands up for this. It's a good sign of just volunteer interest in the town, and it's an important board.
Mhm.
As you said, having served on it and having served as chair, I can tell you that it's a wonderful, hardworking, very collaborative group of people. And I know we know each other through the school and elsewhere in town, and you come with a reputation as somebody who works well with others through your work on the PTO and otherwise, and that's a really, really critical skill for that board, because they're hard policy conversations to have, and it's roll up your sleeve work, and I know that you do a wonderful job with that, so thank you for putting your hand up.
Great, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I have a comment. I really found your reference to third places pretty engaging. That may be old hat to others, but that was new to me, and I really thought that was not only a measure of some considerable insight into what our community is, but thinking about it, it's certainly an environment in which we've discussed a number of things tonight: traffic safety. Some of the budgetary matters simply is what does the town do? Does it maintain its levels? At some considerable cost. And I must say I was really taken by that. Again, as a measure of not only of your insight but your commitment to the place. I mean, you have to really love and know a place to even spy third places. So, thank you for applying. Sure. And. Thanks.
Yeah, and I chose not to jump in and comment on the budget conversation, and I know that library bill is going to be a big pill to swallow, but it is the most critical third place, I think, in this town, and
It's
so
not
that's why
with
I was
capital
proud to
letters.
vote for
Yeah,
it, and
yeah.
I will be peripherally helping with the fundraising effort as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for all the service that you've already given to our town. And to the
Well,
people who
thank you. Great.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Let's bring up Tom.
I think I forwarded Tom's,
Yes.
and the board members that are here have it in hard copy as well.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Tom Carlhuber, live on Bacon Drive. Yep, sorry about that. Live on Bacon Drive. I was excited to hear about the position. I'm an architect who work at Truex Collins. My education's in architecture and in planning. I grew up in central Vermont. I left for school. Lived in Boston for a large chunk of time, working professionally there. Within architecture, also teaching within architecture and sustainable design, and the potential, and I think the responsibility for people in my field to participate in local government, local land planning, helping to make our connections between the environment, between our people, between our cultural institutions here in Shelburne. It's a pretty amazingly diverse place and what it offers. Someone who, a citizen of the community, from the community itself, the micro communities that exist within the various areas of the town. Natural amenities like the lake, like the La Platte River, the trails, and at the same time having really great village that's vibrant and really connecting to all of those things and to all of the people. And for myself, promoting those things, protecting those things, protecting the open land fund, are critical to my being a member of the community here. I've been here for 5 years, enjoying and getting to know this place and wanting to help maintain it and improve it.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for applying, Tom. I'm continually blown away by just the caliber and credentials of people that put their hands up in town. So, thank you. You know, we're fortunate to have choices like this, and they're hard. But, yeah, no. Again, I mean, I echo my comments to Susanna. It's a just super high energy, very high functioning group of people, and I don't know if you've had a chance to spend time with the town plan or with any of the zoning bylaws at all, but it's a big chunk of work to do on the comprehensive plan. So we're thankful for you putting your hand up, and thanks.
One point of admiration, just total unvarnished admiration, and that is your deliberate employment choices. So to gain the experiences you have on your own, you know, not so much marching to your own music, but it takes, in my mind, somebody really to be admired who makes that number of choices deliberately to expand their knowledge base, their experience, to become better at what they do. And it's not a frequent experience of mine to run into somebody like that, and I thought it was worth mentioning.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make the point to the two applicants that we have turnover on virtually every board on a regular basis, and obviously there's only one spot, but I hope that whoever is not appointed, considers that it's more likely a reflection that there's only one spot, and consider applying again when another spot opens up.
I'd like to suggest, Gary, that according to our practice, that we take this decision at another point. Joe can fill me in here on what the formality is.
Our preference is a staff, and I don't want to push anyone to making a poor decision, is that we're kind of hurting for some planning commissioners right now. Some of it is, I think, vacations and some other things. So staff's preference would be to have someone ready to go at Thursday's planning commission meeting. That means you.
I think Jerry might have been referring to having a discussion in executive session.
Tonight.
Is that correct?
Got it.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a select board's decision. But I'd like the select board to make a decision tonight, if you can.
So the question is would we go quickly into executive session now when it wasn't on the agenda, or add it to item 20?
Well, I think I should add it to number 20 at this point.
Easy and a quite radical proposal. I mean, ever since I've taken this seat, I think I have mentioned on many times my degree of discomfort with the process for assigning people to boards. Since there are no rules, really, and as Jamie has said and Jerry has said, we get such great people. And one of my concerns is that there doesn't seem to be a process by which the board committee, the CBC, that people get appointed to, they're the ones who have to deal with them. And I'm never really quite sure why the process isn't that the applications don't go to that CBC first, who can then address what kind of attributes the candidates have that might be most suitable for that group, and because they know better than anybody else. And so I'm constantly in this quandary. And when you have such obviously qualified people, is going to executive session really going to help us much? I mean, at this point, I would suggest we flip a coin. Because I don't think we're going to do anything different. Or, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the effort is. But I only say that with the urging that the select board take it upon itself to come up with a much more rational approach. Now, it's easy when there's only one person who's applying for one position. That's not a problem. It's that when we in this problem, I feel really uncomfortable, and I would like to come up with a solution.
I think you're right. The off-cycle appointments are not ideal, and we've talked about the Hansberg process, and I know Mary Keto and I have had a couple conversations about how do we formalize it a little bit more, and Joe has, plug-and-play templates that we can introduce. I still think there's merit to having a conversation in executive session, so we can be candid about, our own experiences on the boards and from our priorities, frankly. I'm not really a big fan of flipping a coin to do it, but
I don't think we'd lose.
No, I agree with Jamie. I think the saving grace here is that we have Jamie, whose experience is...
If it were up to me, we'd appoint two.
Yeah, that's right.
So we don't have the benefit of doing that, unfortunately. The DRB has alternates, the Planning Commission doesn't, so we don't have that luxury.
Well, I mean, following up on that, then can I offer a motion that we either put it on the agenda for a future date to work on?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we move as quickly as possible to come up with a structured mechanism that will improve our ability to appoint quality people to our CBCs.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Second that.
So the two applicants that are here, are both of you amenable to the fact that we'll be discussing this later? It's going to be late, and we might get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, you don't need to stick around.
Yeah.
We have a...
Okay.
I guess just a point of order, which truly I just thought of, and I know it's been done before, but I never really thought about it. But again, our rules of procedure, and I think everything else, says we have to, anything that gets added to an agenda has to be at the beginning of the session. And so this would be, and I say, it's not that we haven't done it before, but I'm just pointing out that this would be a deviation from rules of procedure.
I guess I think that since it's a decision item, you can probably make a decision to add this to an executive session. I know that maybe that's a technicality, Josh, but I think that you do have the flexibility in the agenda to do that. But point well taken. Maybe,
it's
maybe in
almost
the future when I know that there's interviews, I should just.
It's almost an oversight. I mean,
that.
that probably should have been added, or at least had a conversation about.
I just thought,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to strive
right.
for some consistency in the way we do business.
You're right.
So do we stick with, the procedure and just say, okay, we can't make a decision tonight and we're gonna have to wait until the next board meeting when we know we need a planning commission member? Or do we make, like a one-time allowance that will add this in the executive session tonight? How do people feel about that?
No, I think the consensus is we do, as has been our practice tonight, but we thoroughly examine alternatives to it that all of us seem in anticipation agreed to.
Okay.
I think we should make an appointment tonight. They need hands on deck over there, and there's a lot of work to do. So
Okay.
I think we can.
Okay. Did we act on the motion that I made and you seconded?
We voted.
Okay.
I don't think Gary heard.
I think we need to do, I think this, I would just consider
Was that
this
a
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, that was, so your motion was
We
to
moved to
finalize.
prioritize the.
To develop a process for formalizing a selection process, or a selection process for CDC candidates.
Second.
Did you hear that,
You want
Gary?
to call a vote, Gary?
Josh made the motion, and who seconded?
Jamie?
Jamie? Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. All right, someone like to make a motion to enter executive session tonight to discuss the seating of someone on the planning commission from the two applicants?
So moved.
Second?
Was that a yes from someone?
Second.
Jamie
Okay,
motioned and Jerry second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so it's unanimous. We'll just add that then to the other executive session. And then next person is for social services, right, Joe?
Susanna. Suzanne, sorry,
All right, if Suzanne
She's
could please
beginning to
come up
speak.
and,
She's beginning to speak, Gary.
great, thank you.
Okay. I've lived in, I'm Sue Irish. We can go with Sue. And I've lived here since 1976. And I have always been involved with families and children, human development and family studies. I've been an advocate for childcare, education, and et cetera. So I have served Shelburne in preschool settings. I've served Shelburne in the school and also at CVU, where I taught. And I have also served as the children's librarian here for 4 years. So now I've just retired and I've been looking for a place to put my energies. And I'm bearing in mind what you were saying about budget issues, that if monies are well spent in social services area, I think it can save money for the town in the long run. I know that's true. So I'm just putting myself forward that I'd like to become involved with the Social Services Committee. I've met with them the previous 2 meetings and decided it's something I would like to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for all the stuff you've done.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Joe, what is this term for?
4/1/2019.
Great. Anyone have any comments or questions?
Just two, we'd be honored at your involvement. And off the subject a little bit, you've had your hand up for a while earlier tonight with a question, and while you have the mic.
Oh, I just didn't know what UPWP stood for.
There you go.
So it was point of clarification is all. But I think you sort of did it.
Program.
Okay. Thank you very much. Whoever knew.
Yeah. And again, thank you for all you've done to this point.
Great, thank
for
you.
the community.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Someone like to make a motion?
Sure. I move to appoint Sue Irish for a seat on the Social Services Committee beginning January 9th, 2018 through April 1, 2019.
So, second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Great, congratulations, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready for
Hold on a second.
item 10, right, Joe?
Dr. Metz has a question, Gary.
Okay.
In the interest of expediency, why cannot the Select Board just ask the two applicants to step out of the room and take a simple vote? Would that not be the most expedient, simple way? Is there some reason why that would be distasteful in any way?
Well, we may want to think about the fact that this is on TV.
Right.
That's a factor.
Okay.
I appreciate your idea, however, as well as what has been a concern of Josh's for some time, that it would be very important and useful for the town, I think, at some point, for us to talk with anybody who is interested to come about executive sessions. They're the source of a lot of upset and misunderstanding, frustration on the parts of those who are required by law to execute them. And in this case, it's a very decent discussion of what part of this decision ought to be, could be public, and what part not. And I think your point's taken. Maybe when budget's done and there's an opportunity with a little bit less of an agenda, we could arrange a discussion of that.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to item 10, consider renaming a portion of Pheasant Hill Road to Lark Hill Road. Joe, let's make it quick because we're more than an hour behind.
Well, not much of an explanation to me, besides this is what, I think originally there was an issue with the GPS sending people not to these folks' home. So they've been requesting actually a change, and I can't remember the whole history. I've been copied on a lot of emails. Long story short, they're good with Lark Hill. We're good with Lark Hill. It satisfies any E911 issues. So this would just be, I don't know if it came out in my drawing, I tried to pencil or pen the small section that will become Lark Hill. It's just from Harbor Road up to a gate that's there.
It's a portion of Pheasant Hill Road?
It's a yeah, a small portion of that, of Pheasant Hill Road. And basically what this change will do will better, I don't know, it'll send people to their home with the GPS, and it'll work better than it's working now. Anyways, it's fine with staff, and it's fine with the E911 issue, and so there's recommendation is to rename this portion of the road Lark Hill Road, and it is a private road.
So could people start to slice and dice their own road? I guess I'm struggling with, if you have a good reason, for example, the GPS is getting confused, then it's...
Dean, I guess I wasn't prepared with all the history here.
It just seems odd when it's one road to start cutting it up into...
It is on the map, something that looks like one road, but there is a gate, a permanent gate across it, and it really doesn't function as a single road.
Got it. It's not a through road.
It's not a through road. You
Okay.
cannot drive through it.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
That's a good explanation.
So move to rename a portion of Pheasant Hill Road to Lark Hill Road,
As presented, maybe?
as presented.
Okay, moved by Colleen, second by Jeremy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, that was loud.
Okay, it's unanimous. Next, item 11, consider confirming the inclusion of regional dispatch on the town meeting warning. Joe, why don't you go ahead and take it over? You've provided everybody with the proposed resolution.
Sure, and hopefully, I mean, of course we can talk about it, but the purpose here isn't to necessarily for the board to debate on the merits of the proposal. Like I've said a lot of times before, I hope that there are a lot of discussions about the merits and about the concept. This is simply, I don't want to say simply like shouldn't think about it, but this is to indicate the town's, I guess, willingness to put this on the warning. Other communities have done this to date, and so this is just to put it on the ballot. It's not to take it, just to the, yes, well, I don't know if it'll actually be this resolution, but on the town meeting warning, we'll include a question about regional dispatch.
I'm somewhat confused about that because given the number of times we've talked about that, there really hasn't been a discussion phase of this. I know from your presentation at the December meeting, I did have a chance to look into this a little further, and I am not sure it's as simple as how it's being presented, and I am somewhat concerned about having, moving forward with putting this on the ballot without having a discussion. I don't think, certainly, there isn't any objection to the concept of regional dispatch, but I think the questions we need to ask are, is this in the best interest of Shelburne at this time? And is following through with this public safety union municipal district the only option? I mean, I've certainly had a lot of support for the whole idea of regional concepts before, but this one, I think, has a lot of other moving parts that I really wasn't aware of until I started looking at the details. So I know there's a lot of work already been done on this. So there may not be that much interest in doing it, but I'd like to point out some of the things that I found. And one of them, this is essentially creating another special taxing district. All right, and there have been lots of concerns about the whole idea of these kinds of taxing districts. In fact, the ICMA, of which Joe is a member, one of their journal had an article this year essentially really issuing concerns about these kinds of things because the research is showing that often when you delegate or at least move local control, the costs for doing that are potentially 10 to 15% more. And so there may be lots of successes, and we know we have some regional entities that work pretty well. But given the discussion that we just had with about the budget, I think we need to be cautious, and we need to be sure that whatever we're promoting leads to an advantage to the town and not higher costs for the town. And looking through all the materials that I've been given, and in fact, it wasn't until over the holidays when I started looking at this, I realized that the updated stuff was in the back of the budget book. But what I can tell, let me just give you my review of what I found is, and it seems like this effort, and this comes from the presentations that Joe has met, but also talking to a bunch of other people, is that what I can tell is it appears to be an effort driven by administrative staff across the county. And that's not any way of diminishing that support. And I'm sure there are lots of good intentions of trying to come up with a good reason for doing this. But the purpose in all the documentation has been to create a governance structure, which is all well and good, and it's what administrators do the best. However, for this to work, it has to be functional, and the operational details need to be worked out before you have an organization, or at least figure out if it's going to work. And even though there's been a technical advisory committee, there's not a plan per se. And I understand that there's been pretty minimal input from the dispatchers, who are the on-the-ground people who know how this is going to be operational. And I think that's a really significant part of this whole thing. So in some ways, is this a chicken or egg, cart before the horse type of operation that I think we just need to think about and see if this is what we want? I mean, the earlier discussions on this suggested that South Burlington and Colchester were going to do a trial run of this. That would inform our decision, just sort of seeing how this was put together. That hasn't happened, so I'm not quite sure why not and what else is lurking in the background there. But I think the most important thing is that Shelburne doesn't have to join, we don't have to have this vote for this to go forward. I think it's, even though I think Joe said 2, I think there's 3 groups, 3 municipalities that need to agree. And I know Colchester, South Burlington, and Burlington are pretty secure in going that. And so one could make an argument that we need to have a seat at the table. But there's also an argument, is this a table we need to sit at the moment? And the most important part is Shelburne is really unique in this whole process, in which this is the biggest concern, is that Shelburne has already done a lot of the work and a head start in the mechanics of development. No, I can finish what I'm doing, thank you. We already have a good track record. The people in dispatch have done an excellent job. I'm not sure, they have over 30 contracts to do this work. They know the nuts and the bolts. In fact, Shelburne has created probably a third of what's needed in a regional dispatch. And so that expertise and those contracts are really what will form a big part of this regional program. So I think whether we have this on the ballot or not is irrelevant to Shelburne's needs in making this, in going forward with this. I'm sure if we're not in the initial group of people, municipalities to start, there's always going to be great interest in Shelburne coming apart because we have those contracts, we have the expertise. The other thing is our dispatch isn't broken. If we join this, then we're offering our expertise, and this is a good thing to help other municipalities deal with dispatch that they don't have a robust system as we have. So it's important to recognize that our system isn't broken. Maybe others are. But what would be lost if we join a to-be-determined system? Because the details haven't worked out. I can't see any of the numbers that tell me that this is going to be a good thing. We've built an effective system that responds equally to police, fire, rescue. Other municipalities don't have that perspective. Some of them are focused on one or the other. That's an important part of that certainly we could bring to the table, but without knowing the operational part, we don't know if that's in the thing. So the benefits will mostly be to other communities. And so the last is the budget concerns. And even though it's true that there would have to be a second vote to actually provide the taxing authority to do this, it may not be better to commit until we have a clear indication of the costs and the benefits for going ahead with this. The previous comments in this room has shown that any realization of savings may be a long way out. And the development of this kind of program, as with any other entity, entails long-term costs of capital, of training, of everything else. Our dispatchers already have the 911 training that nobody else does. So the organization and the operations aren't fleshed out, and it's not proven. So even though I appreciate, and I'm very happy with the amount of work that's gone into this effort so far, since I can't see the data that suggests that this will be a benefit in some way to Shelburne in the short run. And I'm just saying the short run. This can happen. I don't see a sense of urgency that we need to put this on the ballot now before we have a better idea what's going on. And so I'm not inclined to put it on. Now, some of the board members may be comfortable to act upon the assumptions and the projections, but I'd really like to see more data in all of this. And I think that the most important part is, going back to this, is not agreeing to be part of something that we really don't know the full scope. So, sorry I took a while, but I think it's a really important part.
So, Josh, I'd like to say something, but Josh, do you want to say something first?
Yeah, well, simply, I mean, there's a number of comments that Josh made, and I think what I said the last meeting, I agree
Yes,
with.
yeah, I agree.
I'm not, in a lot of ways, I'm not in favor of extra layers of government and things like this. So there are some things, Josh, that I certainly agree with. I think there are some, I would like, maybe, because it's been a priority that the select board has also put on me, I've been working on this for 2 years. I'm willing and able to talk about this in my sleep to anyone who wants to listen. And I haven't had a select board member, I don't think, come and sit down with me to learn about this after spending 2 years. So I guess I would appreciate that. If the community would like a presentation, I certainly could do that. Your fire chief and acting police chief have both shown their support for a regional entity, and in particular that what we've learned a lot through going a regional approach is really the benefit for fire is quite, the fire service seems to be pretty clear. It has been a preferred alternative since 1964. It's not just administrator driven. That's simply not correct. But there are a lot of things I agree with what you said, Josh. I don't disagree with everything there. There would be, I think, anyways, I would like to give more of a presentation when I have a chance to put it out to the public, because I've been working on this for quite a while, and I think it would be helpful. There are 2 steps, well, 3 steps. 1, the select board has to agree to put it on the ballot. 2, voters would have to approve the Union Municipal District. 3rd, a select board in the future, after town meeting, would have to agree to have Shelburne actually join the district. So, yes, there are a lot of pieces of information that need to be learned still before Shelburne would vote to join, but there are 3 steps that need to happen. This isn't put it on the ballot, voters vote it, and then it's done. It's not just done like that. It would just be the authorization in the future. But I would like to give a presentation.
All right,
if that'd be helpful.
So the one thing that I wanted to say is when this first came up, prior to you being on the board, and I was initially opposed to it because, not necessarily because of budget reasons, but because of safety reasons. And there had been reports nationwide of calls being crossed and emergency vehicles being sent to a certain address on a certain road, and it was the completely wrong town. And I've been satisfactorily reassured that not only is this going to be as safe, but it's going to be safer for the residents of Shelburne. And the multiple presentations that we have had on the subject discuss specifically that. You know, it's not just about when you're in Shelburne, unless you stay in Shelburne and that's the only place you go. You never travel outside of Shelburne. But if you go anywhere else, this is going to make it safer for you traveling anywhere else, and your safety is not going to get decreased by staying in Shelburne either. It'll be safer for you and all the residents of Shelburne, whether they're in Shelburne and as they travel outside of the town. And so for me, that was probably like my biggest driver. And the budget, I agree with you. You know, like we don't know. Like, will the cost go down initially and then start to creep back up? But the one advantage to having the seat at the table at the beginning is the fact that we can have a voice in dictating what happens.
And I agree with you, although I'm not sure that, and I've listened to all the presentations. I mean, I'm not doing this in a void, and I've looked at all the information that it is available. And I don't disagree. I'm not, and as I said at the beginning, I am not saying that this is not necessarily a good idea. But Shelburne is truly a unique part of this puzzle. And I would really prefer that the other communities who are far more interested in this do the trial run. Let them work out the kinks, so to speak. Let them figure out, okay, what's going to work? Let the dispatchers figure out, because, Colleen, what you're saying is, in doing the exploration of this, yes, it's the rest of the county, the rest of the town, but we have contracts with people outside the county. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. And it just seems like it potentially jeopardizes what we have at this point, and without knowing the definition. And I appreciate all the work that Joe has done on this. And there's nothing to say that this isn't a good idea. It's just, I don't think we have to put it on the ballot and jump into the thing, since we are the organization that probably has the greatest investment in this whole process.
I appreciate Josh's effort at data gathering, and I value his analysis, but we will disagree on whether it rises to a question of putting something on a ballot or not, which is the question we're discussing. I'd be hesitant about not allowing the town to voice their opinion on this, in the understanding that between now and that ballot, there's a great deal of opportunity to treat in some detail the concerns he's raised. But I would favor putting it on a ballot at this point, and with a resolve that we all do, Joe and us, all we can to inform voters about many of the points he's raised, and others, and other points that can be raised, as Colleen has alluded to, in support or against, depending upon how anybody chooses eventually to vote.
I mean, I would just say Josh makes some pretty compelling points. I mean, I also tend to be an advocate for local control, and I don't think there are some regional utilities and organizations that don't work very well right now, and we're having challenges with some of those, as we all know. So I do have some hesitation with this, and Joe, I agree with you. I think you have had an open door with this, but I'm not sure the broader public really has had an opportunity to dive in on the details. I think we're still digesting the details, and I do wonder if maybe you could just speak to the benefits of having your foot in the door first, right? And that's what I'm still not sure about, really. Is there a benefit to, other than maybe having a voice in sort of how the entity evolves and how it launches and gets off the ground? Is there any?
I guess all I'd say now, my preference would be to prepare a formal presentation of sorts.
Okay.
That might be most helpful. I mean, I don't know if it's such a debate whether or not to put this on the town meeting. I mean, this decision can, quite frankly, wait till the January 23rd when the warning needs to be set. Again, putting this, even if voters approve it, that doesn't mean the select board at that time is required to join it. It just approves
That would be a tough decision, though, right after a vote. Let's say it passes for 5 people to say, hey, this is not a good idea.
Yeah,
right?
that's my concern as well. Is once we move.
Step in the process, but is it really an opportunity for?
I mean, and we can have,
I don't know.
and we could have a vote on the next election too. I mean, if it's more fleshed out at that point.
But there are penalties.
There are
penalties if you wait.
Such as?
You're willing to discount them, I'm not.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I asked.
I was-
Benefits to being
I was tough,
first.
yeah.
Okay.
I apologize if I stepped in.
Yeah. Maybe it makes sense to defer this one.
I was happy, and so, if I knew that there was going to be a little more requirement for discussion, I'm happy to be a little bit more, I guess maybe it's a late hour, I don't know if my mind's shutting off, but prepared to answer some of the questions that I heard tonight, and I'd be happy to do that. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's up to the board. If we need a vote tonight, then I tend to think like Jerry, that I would be in favor of putting it on the ballot, but I do see merit in vetting it a little bit more closely and having the public.
I'd agree. I think
all.
if we take this up on the 23rd, that's fine.
That's fine. I just wanted to, that's.
I mean, I guess my point is, like the budget, like the personnel policy, I mean, I'm not trying to sound, my door is always open to the select board. I think people know that, whether it's the select board or the public. I'll sit down with people for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I've been working on, this information for over 2 years, and I don't know if I've had anyone really come and spend that sort of time with me.
Joe, that's fair, but I will say, like, you have topics like the library where the community said, hey, we didn't really understand everything going on, and we didn't see every angle of this, and this is one where I would be very surprised if a high percentage of the community has actually spent any time looking at this, as much as
I get that.
As much time as we've spent as a town developing this.
Right.
I'm not sure there's been enough
Exactly.
push of the material and information out.
All right,
that's all.
and really that's why I was bringing this up. I mean, it's like the exchange we had this afternoon, Joe. I mean, I think if we put something on the agenda for the select board to discuss, then the select board discusses it. And I'm more than happy to come and talk with you privately about this, but I think the role of select board meetings is to engage in discussion so the public understands what the decisions are, what the issues are. And you've already made some very excellent presentations on the issue. I took that, and with the information that was available to me, I had concerns, and I felt that it's my responsibility to voice them.
No, not debating any of that. Absolutely not.
No. You think we need a motion, Gary, to reschedule it for the...
Chris Boyd is
sorry.
opening.
Okay.
I am in favor of going forward with.
Linda Reel,
First, Linda has a comment.
Yes, it's all about public understanding. I've come to a lot of meetings since the summer, and I think a meeting ago when Joe spoke about the regional 911 was when it caught my attention and I started thinking about it. So what I'm wondering is, have conversations been held with Shelburne dispatchers, rescue personnel, and that was the first I heard that the fire chief was in favor of the regional 911 plan. I'm also thinking we need to hear the pluses and minuses before we jump into a big change like this. So not just give us the pluses, please tell us what the drawbacks. Tell us what the drawbacks might be as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I just want to be clear with both the board and the public. Just because I've been working on this for 2 years, I'm not trying to sell the board or the public on anything. I'm certainly not just gonna, when present the public pluses. I was hopefully even clear the last meeting. I can certainly see pluses and minuses. I don't want that to be lost here. This isn't like a sales job or something like that. It's legitimate, and there have been a lot of discussions. I get it. We can involve the public more, but fire, rescue, dispatchers, police have been involved for well over a year on this. There's been consultant studies. There's been input not just from our public safety personnel, but public safety personnel around the county too. I mean, there's been a lot of involvement. And not to say everyone's unified, I get that. But there has been quite a bit of involvement, and I'm happy to do presentations, or a presentation.
Chris Boyd is going to speak, Gary.
Just real quick.
And by the way, excuse me, by the way, Gary, Colleen has departed, I assume, for the evening.
I gotta tell you, I'm not gonna be able to last much longer either. This meeting is way.
Well, you know, I think that's too bad because we have an executive session and we're about to start one item where we won't even have two.
Bothering you with comments,
Yeah.
I mean, I can go sit back down.
Please.
All I ask with the regionalization, 2 things to keep in mind, because you've gotten into it a lot further than I have, Joe, obviously. But cost benefit, and is what we have broken?
No.
Yep.
And I want to be clear, what we have is not broken. Shelburne Dispatch is fabulous, and that's not what this was ever about, is to say that it's not being done well, adequately, outstandingly now. That's not to say that there's not a more efficient way to do it. So this is absolutely, not just now, but long-term, right? But this is absolutely not any sort of indictment that somehow it's not being done well now. It's being done fabulously right now.
Where would it be housed?
Right now, there is a location in South Burlington that seems to be the front runner as a possible physical location. We've looked at that, and that's a possibility. Well, why don't I put together a presentation
Sure.
for the January 23rd meeting?
Yeah.
And, but yes, we have looked at this as a location too.
Yeah, this one feels like a front porch forum post to me as well. I think it's important if it's going to be a ballot item, I'd say we need to proactively get the word out, and as much as you have, I think it's one of these where the more we push, the more people will it'll stick. That's all.
I'm going to make a suggestion, Gary, that if your time is short, that we move to item 20, which is business that I would be quite upset to learn that we weren't able to consider because of the absence of 2 more members.
So Jerry, do you want to make a motion though that we're gonna put this on the January 23rd?
Yes,
that's fine.
Yeah, do you need a
Can that be-
motion or can you just take it?
Why don't we make it a motion, just since it was a decision item for tonight?
I move that we place further discussion of this item on the agenda for the January 23rd meeting.
Second.
Okay.
Discussion? Hearing none, we call a vote, Gary?
You can call it.
Call the vote.
I think we'll call a vote.
Yep.
Those, please signify by saying aye, those of you who approve.
Aye.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute for a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's,
Any opposed?
yeah, we all are, Gary. That's unanimous.
Okay.
What do you think of the idea of moving to 20? So we
And
take it,
and we'll eliminate the other ones?
I wouldn't say eliminate the other ones. I'd
Yeah.
like to get to the discussion of now 5 items.
Okay.
And we have one member gone and one member who's given
Okay.
indications that he might not be long-lasting.
Well,
I'm okay with it. I wonder if it might be better to just defer number 14 until,
that's going to be a long one.
that's going to be a long one. I wonder if we just continue that to the 23rd.
Do you guys want to do a? Oh, I'm not gonna
And
say
then
that.
I think
I'm fine with that.
I think we can knock out the others relatively quickly, right?
What, Gary? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm fine with putting over number 14.
Okay.
I don't think that's critically time sensitive right now.
I'm okay with it, except for this board said it was going to approve this in February, and it's going to be February before we know it. So I get it. We can push it back.
But there's no rush on this. You said this before. There's no rush that we have to push this through.
I said that in November.
Again, as you said, the current policy has been in place since 1990. A month or two isn't going to make a difference.
Okay. All right. So
I'm going to repeat my request that we move to 20, with all due apologies for anybody who's sitting here awaiting 12 through 19. Because if we don't, and we lose one more member, then a good portion of the functionality of that executive session is gone and wasted, and forevermore will never occur. And I think that's why we're here.
Okay. What do we have to do to do
And
that?
I would, with your permission, Gary, as the chair, as vice chair, I would so move.
You know, if anybody wants to do it, whatever the majority wants to do, I'm in favor of.
Well, I mean, could we entertain Jamie's idea that we just knock off the things that are going to take, that could be...
motion on the floor.
It's not seconded. The motion, as far as I know, is
You've
not
heard the
seconded.
man.
Okay, so where are we?
So in 10 minutes, we could be down to 2 people who could discuss, which is no quorum. Okay?
All right, I have some concerns about number 20, so we can go, I'm good with it, but if that's what you want to do, I mean. And we just, we, and then we, and we, and we, and, okay.
Okay, so Jerry moves that we go to item number 20 right now, and Jamie seconds. Is that correct?
That's
Correct.
Correct. Any further discussion?
Your concerns?
If we were moving to 20, I have concerns about 20, so if we move to, I can bring that up when we get there.
We're on 20.
All right.
Okay?
Right.
We
Yeah,
have to
we're
vote, do we have to vote on that?
Yes.
To move to 20.
To move to
on the
20,
agenda.
yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments on the motion? Anyone?
No, we're ready
Hearing
to
none,
go.
all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Someone like to
With
make
due
a
apologies to
motion?
everybody, but we don't want to run the risk we
Someone
don't
like to
even
make
have a
the
quorum.
motion in regard to 20?
Yeah, I'd like, before we get into voting on number 20, unless we're going to break out all of these things, I have concerns about how some of these things are worded in 20, because I think the motions that are going to have to be made are something to the effect, if I can never remember the proper language, that I will have to determine whether that their premature general knowledge of an item will place the select board at a substantial disadvantage, okay? If I look at number 1, discuss attorney-client communication regarding personnel, how could I possibly know if that would be, I don't know anything about that item. And in fact, if you look at the open meetings law, I don't even think that fits into any of the categories for a reason unless you can define, is this one person? Is this a individual? Is this a personnel policy? The only thing in the open meeting law is the appointment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, a disciplinary action against a public officer or employee. How can I assess whether, probably, whether that item fits, because I don't have any more information. If I went further to say, discuss annual town manager review per the contract under number 2, what does that mean? Are we actually going to review the town manager, or are we developing a process for reviewing the town manager? If it's just a process, that's not a executive session item. If we go to number 3, discuss review of the town clerk and salary, is that discussing the town clerk's performance, which would be acceptable in executive session? If we're just talking about what the process is, no, that's not executive session. If we talk about salary, yeah, that could be executive session. So I think we have to meet the wording, the intent and the wording of the open meetings law, which is to have discussions in public session. And so to have public meetings in public session, we need to provide a substantial explanation of what is going to be discussed. So there's no way I could agree to 1, 2, or 3.
Are you finished, Josh? Can I respond?
Yes, you may.
All right. In regards to number 1, discuss attorney-client communication regarding personnel, I suggest that you were wrong about reading open meeting law. If you read 1 VSA 313, A1F, it says, in regards to the items that can be discussed is F states, I quote, confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body. And if you follow the amendments to this item, this was specifically added for the very reason that we're going forward. The next item is discuss annual town manager review per contract. Again, I disagree with your statement that it doesn't provide for in the open meeting law. Again, I direct your attention to 1 VSA 313 in regard to item 313A3, which deals with the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public official or employee in an open meeting and explain the reasons in its final decision during the open meeting. This is not to hire or appoint a public official. So I'm going to disagree with you from just reading the statute.
I think you just answered my question. You just supported my contention. But that's...
Well, I'm going to disagree with you wholeheartedly. All right, anybody else have anything they want to discuss? No? Would someone like to make a motion first in regard to the finding? Jerry, it was your idea to go forward at this time. Do you want to make the motion?
It's the motion for all 5.
I was just momentarily baffled by finding. I'm not sure what your question is.
You have to make a premature general.
General knowledge.
There's 6, right?
You need assistance? Want some assistance?
We have to do that for 6, correct?
Yes.
Do you need any assistance, or do you want to make a motion?
It'd be wonderful if I had it in front of me, since I haven't memorized it. No.
Oh, this I don't have that.
Yeah, I can make it.
Someone like to move? I would entertain a motion for a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body, meaning the select board involved, at a substantial disadvantage pursuant to 1 VSA 313 to discuss attorney-client communications regarding personnel, discuss the annual town manager review per contract, and discuss the review of the town clerk salary, and an update on conservation law foundation's appeal of the town's WWTP permit, which is under 1 VSA 313 A1E.
So
Is that
moved.
helpful for you, Jerry?
So
Is
moved.
that good?
You have to add the VTR and the CBC applicants, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and to discuss
You have 5 and 6.
the applicants for the planning commission.
Correct. So moved.
Right. Moved by Jerry. Is there a second?
I second, with the caveat that to the extent there is conversation about process with respect to 1 or 2, that be communicated in public session. Or recommunicated.
3.
as
Or
the
3.
case may be.
Yeah.
Or
1,
3.
2, or
I'm
3.
sorry, I'm sorry, but that's an improper addition. If you don't want to second the motion, don't second it, but you
Well, we could come
can't
back
make
and discuss
caveats to
process.
the motion.
We have a remaining agenda.
I noted, Mr. Chair, you're right. Yes, so, let's see. Do you want to restate the motion?
Well, there's a motion on the floor. I'll tell you what, I'll make it easy for you, Jerry. I'll second it. Okay? Seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
I second my comment previously. To the extent there's conversation or dialogue around process with respect to those items, they should be recommunicated in public session.
Okay, that's a discussion item. It's not part of the motion, though. I hope you understand that. I would have been happy to include it, but it wasn't part of the motion. There's nothing I can do. It's just a procedure.
Well, we'll vote the motion down then and
Right.
yeah.
I'm not in favor of the motion then.
You want to call a vote, Gary?
Okay. Good. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
We're going to restate
All right,
it
we
to
have
make
to-
Jamie and...
We have to do it. I'm sorry.
They have to
sorry.
do
We
a
have
roll
to do a
call.
roll call vote
A roll
because
call.
it's not unanimous. So please, Josh,
A nay.
Jerry,
Jerry's a nay.
Jamie.
Nay.
Aye. All right. I'm going to leave it all to you guys. You go ahead.
Do you want to give it a run? Or?
Yeah, please, no. I'll
Okay.
rely on you.
I move that finding of premature general knowledge of the select board,
May put the...
let me restate that. Make a motion that the select board has made findings that premature general knowledge would place the town at a substantial disadvantage with respect to 1, discussing attorney-client communication regarding personnel, 2, discuss annual town manager review per contract, 3, discuss review of town clerk and salary, 4, update on Conservation Law Foundation's appeal of the town WWTP permit, 5, VTRR, legal proceedings, 6, appointment of a planning commissioner. With the condition that any dialogue with respect to process relating to items 1, 2, and 3 be recommunicated in public session.
Second?
Any discussion? Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Roll call vote, please. Jamie?
Aye.
Aye.
Jerry?
Nay. Nay.
And nay for me, so that motion doesn't pass. Does anyone else want to make a different motion?
I will make a motion that repeats the other one, dropping item number 1, since that's the item that I have no knowledge of. So I can't make that determination. I'm happy with the other ones, as Jamie has stated it. So would you like to restate it? In
other words,
we won't do number 1, but we can do the others.
Okay.
You're eliminating 1?
I'm eliminating 1.
Sure. I move that the Select Board has made a finding that premature general knowledge would place the town at a substantial disadvantage in connection with 1, discussing annual town manager review per contract, 2, discuss review of town clerk and salary, 3, update on Conservation Law Foundation's appeal of the town's WWTP permit, 4, VTRR legal proceedings, and 5, appointment of a planning commissioner. With the condition that any discussion with respect to process relating to items 1 and 2 be recommunicated in public session.
Moved by Jamie, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, Josh, was that you?
That was me.
Okay, seconded by Josh. Any further discussion?
I just can't support dropping it, Josh.
Okay.
Altogether.
Okay, fine.
Hearing none. I'm sorry, Jerry, did you have a discussion item dropping it? Yeah, I'm not going to support it either, but go ahead. Do you have something else?
No,
Jerry?
no. I was just commenting.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think, and nay?
Nay.
All, against? Nay. All right, doesn't pass. Is there any other motion?
Come on, gang, we got to agree on something
Yeah,
here.
Jerry, give it a run and try to.
If I can get a indication, as I said initially, which would have made this a lot easier, if I can get an indication of what topic, give the audience, give the public.
Just take number 1 off.
And that's what we just did, and that's what we did.
Just take it off. I've also lost track, so
It
just
didn't
take
pass.
1 off.
That,
It didn't
we,
pass.
we took it off and it didn't pass. So all I'm
I'll
asking
deal
is,
with I'll try 1 again next week and state it in a better way. Just take 1 off now. Do it later.
We did,
we did.
and it didn't pass.
No, well, then I guess the meeting's over.
I mean, if you can just, all I'm trying to do is be consistent with the open meeting law.
But you're not consistent with your point about distinguishing between confidential material and process.
Correct.
You
Well,
haven't
no,
given
no,
one
there's
a
different.
chance on either count.
No. Number 1 is just,
You haven't
when it
given
says
one a
personnel.
chance on either count.
What?
You haven't given a chance on either count.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
I don't
The
think so.
one is, I want to know is if we're regarding personnel in the big picture or an individual in the smaller picture. That's, because the open meeting law talks about, yes, it's correct that attorney-client privilege is adequate here, but everything else is evaluation of an individual. If this doesn't,
Where do you see evaluation of an individual in number 1?
That's what I'm saying. It's not clear to me.
Okay.
It's not clear if this is an individual, if this is a process. I mean, are we talking about, again, are we talking about a big picture, or are we talking about an individual?
Okay, I think we've
That's
got to
all
move along, Josh. We got bigger fish to fry at the moment. And can you restate your motion?
Which one, including 1 or no?
The one you just made that was, it has to be reconsidered by someone who voted against, correct? No, who voted for?
I voted for, we removed number 1, and we had another revote. You voted against,
Correct.
not including number 1.
That's correct.
All right. So I don't think we can move any farther unless if someone can give me.
Yes, you can. We can reconsider it, and for the sake of accomplishing some business and.
Listen, I'll
I'm okay
reconsider
with
my,
that.
if Gary
Yeah.
wants to make the original motion, I'll reconsider it. You've heard my feelings on the process piece, and I will recommunicate it.
Okay, I would entertain a motion making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge clearly reflects the public body, meaning the select board, involved at substantial disadvantage in regard to discussion of attorney-client communication regarding personnel, discussing the annual town manager review per contract, discussing the review of the town clerk and salary, and update of the conservation law, foundation's appeal of the town, WWTP permit, Vermont Railway litigation, which actually needs to be separate unless Josh is recusing himself. But I included it. And the appointment of someone to the planning commission.
Second?
No, I was entertaining a motion, so someone has to make
So moved.
move.
Second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, and Josh, you would need to recuse yourself from that because of that one portion of it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay with recusal from number of item 5.
Okay, regardless of Josh's vote, it passes. So I'll just leave that aside. And the next item would be
How can you leave that
enter-
aside? I'm not quite sure, but that's all right. It's, as Jerry says,
The next item would be, and I'll leave out the Vermont Railway, so Josh, you can vote on this, okay? Consider entering executive session for 1 VSA 313 to discuss attorney-client communication regarding personnel, discuss annual town manager review for contract, discuss review of town clerk and salary, update on conservation laws, foundations appeal, the town's WWTP permit, Vermont Railway litigation with the town, and appointment of someone to, I withdraw the portion about the Vermont Railway litigation and appointment of someone to the planning commission. So someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Jerry, and Josh, you can vote on this because the Vermont Railway is not included, and invite the town manager. If, sorry, I forgot that. Is everyone good with that amendment? Or
Yes.
would like to? Everyone good? Josh, you good with that?
yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And it's unanimous. Someone
No,
like to?
I'm voting nay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then we have to do a roll call vote. Josh,
Nay.
Jerry,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
aye for me. And now, Josh, I'm assuming you're going to recuse yourself on this, and this is to consider entering executive session to discuss the litigation between the Vermont Railway and the town, and invite the town manager. Someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And I will recuse myself.
Okay, and just to be on the safe side, we'll do a roll call vote. Jamie?
Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Aye for me, and Josh?
Recuse.
Recuse. Okay. Enter executive session, and Joe, do I call back?
I'll call you directly from inside executive session.
Okay, great, bye.
And you could use this.
TV.
To reconvene the select board meeting of January 9th, 2018. We have a couple of motions to consider. Jerry, would you like to make a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Moved by Jerry, is there a second?
Second.
Josh.
Second by
Choose. You
Jamie?
can choose.
By Josh?
Josh.
Okay, by Josh. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Next, I entertain a motion that the board has agreed to conduct an oral review of, annual review of Joe Colangelo as town manager in executive session.
So moved.
And invite the town, and invite the town manager to that review.
So moved. I thought we were going to put a date on
Yeah,
that.
on or about, did we have a date? February?
Yep, February 13th, maybe?
13th.
Okay, I entertain that motion to take place at
February
the meeting
13th.
in February. February 13th, is that a
Correct.
meeting date?
Yeah.
Right.
On
Right.
February 13th, in executive session, and invite the town manager. Someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jerry, second by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
I'd entertain a motion to appoint Susanna Karras to the Planning Commission for a term beginning tonight and concluding April 1st, 2019, and encourage Tom to apply for the next opening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by, seconded by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I entertain a motion to confirm that the select board agrees that the town manager has the authority to appoint a police chief pursuant to the town charter.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There was, hold on, there was, I think, there was, before you moved on, there was a request for discussion. Before the
I
vote.
thought I asked for that and I didn't hear that.
Yeah, well, because you couldn't see the raised hand before the vote. So
Okay.
if we could step back before the vote.
Well, we already passed it, but we could, we'll have a discussion. Go ahead.
Okay.
Who is it?
You mean I'm invited to speak after the fact, after the decision has been made?
Well, I'd be happy, I don't know who this is, but I'd be happy to take.
Well, you can probably guess, can't you, sir? There's only one person that's as persistent and nasty as I am. I would like to know if there's any point in my speaking. If the decision is already taken, there's no point in my offering any input, is there?
I think there's been.
Please.
I'm happy to take another vote, I'll thank anybody.
Well, I would like to have some input, please.
Okay.
And the input I have is that the acting police chief was selected with the assistance of a panel. And I don't understand why this position, which is even more important, is not also going to have a panel to assist in the selection.
Okay. And I can, let me.
Dr. Metz, let me jump in. The motion was simply a confirmation that pursuant to the town charter, the town manager has the authority to appoint a police chief. It doesn't say anything about whether a panel is going to be
Or how that's going to
happen.
empowered or impaneled or anything. It simply confirms that the select board agrees that it is pursuant to town charter, the town managers.
So it's possible that this could be a little bit more of a democratic process, is it?
Yes, entirely.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not necessarily going to accept your framework, but I'm just saying all the motion is recognizing that's what the town charter says. That's all it says.
It's a fact.
Right.
Can I make a?
All right.
I'll make a statement later.
Anyone else have any
I'll wait till
comments?
town manager's report.
If not, I would entertain a motion, the same motion, just to clear it up, because being on the phone, I didn't know he had raised his hand. A motion that the town manager has the authority to appoint a police chief pursuant to town charter. Someone like to make that motion again?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Anybody? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think it was unanimous. Next, I would entertain a motion that Diana Vachon, as town clerk, will receive a cost of living adjustment pursuant to standard employee cost of living adjustments as of July 1st, 2018.
So moved.
So moved. Sorry.
Josh moved,
Did you get?
Jerry seconded.
Okay, great. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Gentlemen and lady, did I forget any of the motions? I think that's it,
I think you
right?
got them.
All right. We're done on the executive session. Did you want to go back? Item 14, it's 11:23. We're going to push that off to the next meeting, the personnel policy.
Gary, I'd like to
definitely.
make a suggestion to you that we take up items 13, 15, and 16 as a consent agenda, unless there's reason or a necessity of any board member to discuss any of them.
Can you just explain to me what you mean by consent agenda? Because there's three different items.
We move to adopt all three at once by consent.
Okay, but 14 is not a decision.
No, I
item,
said
so
13, 15, and 16.
Okay, I'm great with that. So there's is that a motion, Jerry?
Yes.
Second.
Motion, is there a second, Jamie?
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. On item number 17, public comment continued. Are there any more public comments?
Yes.
Linda has one, yes.
Did we continue item 12 until the 23rd?
No, we haven't come back to that yet.
Should we?
We're continuing.
We'll have to go to 12.
I agree.
Okay, let's continue public comment.
Thank you.
Two comments. My first one is regarding the selection of a new police chief. I would like to see the creation of a panel that includes a high law enforcement official, a member of the select board, personnel dispatch, fire and rescue, and a community member serving on that panel. And my second comment is regarding the salt shed location, the town salt shed. If we're being good stewards, we would want to make sure our very own facility has strong safeguards to prevent the chloride contamination we've heard people in this community say they are very concerned about, and the stringent monitoring should occur there on a regular and frequent basis. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay. Are there any other comments?
I would just concur with Linda on the second point. I saw Tom's note. Joe had an opportunity to respond. I don't know if you saw his response, but I agree with you. I think we need to be diligent about our own town assets. And I hope we're doing that and I continue to do it.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, one more.
I'm not there.
No,
Help me
Dr.
out.
Mess
Is there
has a
anything else?
comment, Gary.
One more comment.
Okay.
Number one, I would like the record to show that two of the members of the Select Board have not acceded to Mr. Ken Albert's request to explain their thinking to the public regarding their vote on the appeal of Judge Sessions' ruling. Two of the Select Board did explain, but two have not. So I would like the record to show that. Number two, I would like to ask if there is a written agreement that the town attorneys will work pro bono on the appeal of Judge Sessions' ruling and all legal matters attending that. If there's a written agreement to that effect, that's my question.
Yes, there is.
Okay, I'll respond to both of those. In regard to the first comment, I thought it was procedurally inappropriate at the time for Mr. Albert to bring this up when he had every opportunity to do so the week before. Next, part B to my response to that, I made my decision based on the law and the facts, so there you go. The second one is in regard to whether there's a written agreement. It's my understanding that the town manager will be posting something on the town website if it's not already posted.
I apologize. There is a written, I just have not had a chance to get online.
And Mr. Chairman, you are ruling Mr. Albert's question as inappropriate and out of order? Do I understand that?
No, you don't understand. Well, maybe you understand that, but that's not what I said.
I think you directed it at me as well, and I responded to Ken, and I told him it's a fair question, and I will respond. I just didn't think it was, I didn't think it was appropriate.
My comment is accurate to this point, is it not?
You're right. It's accurate.
Thank you.
And to the second point, I think it's important just to...
What comment is accurate?
I think he's just asked for the
accurate?
record that two select board members didn't respond, and I feel like I
just
responded.
responded
I'm
again.
committed to
But
doing
not
it.
to the general public, yes?
We went way over 10 minutes when Mr. Albert...
That has nothing to do with my question at this point, sir.
Oh, I know. So,
Yeah, but I just responded.
But
when
just for-
select board comments continued.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to, just on the second question, I think it's important not to characterize the arrangement as pro bono. For some reason, that keeps surfacing, and it's a capped fee arrangement.
I think you're right.
It's a capped fee arrangement, and that's a very common type of fee structure for engaging outside counsel. So it's not pro bono, it's simply a fee that's capped at a certain number.
And that will be
number
made
is-
public? That agreement
Absolutely.
will be made public?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
I meant to post
it'll be
it
made public and
yesterday,
everybody
and I
can
just-
see it for themselves. So I agree
I
with
know,
you
I keep
completely.
seeing that too, and I'm struggling with where that came from. I think it's just probably a misnomer, right? I think somebody probably said.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big...
But it would be helpful
Yeah.
if the
I agree.
agreement were made public, so we wouldn't use that
100%
anymore.
agree with you.
Yes, correct.
Agreed. Thank you
Yeah,
for
it's
raising
going to
it.
be posted. Anything else?
Maybe it might be on now.
All right, next on the agenda, select board comments. I sure hope nobody has anything, but go ahead.
Can I address number 12, Gary, before we,
Oh,
by
yeah, please.
suggesting
I'm sorry.
that we pen that discussion to the next meeting?
Which was number 12?
I take that as a
12,
motion that we
tax penalty.
continue item 12 to the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, the late property tax penalty waivers. That we
Yes.
just, that
So
we,
there's a motion to continue that item. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.
you want to deal with
Did anybody?
personnel policy, Joe?
No.
I thought we were doing that next meeting.
Thought we already
Okay, then I'd also suggest,
like to-
Gary,
know that.
There's,
All right, select board comments. Any select board comments? Item number 18.
yeah, I suggest we postpone item 14 to the next meeting too.
what's 14?
The
That's the
personnel
personnel.
policy.
I would
we
like
can
it
do
to the meeting after that. There's a possibility I may not be here next
26?
week. Yeah,
Oh,
I may not
okay.
be here next week.
It's fine.
Is that the 23rd? 23rd?
23rd.
23rd. We'd like to postpone number 14, the review of the proposed town employee personnel policy, Gary, to January 23.
Okay, there's a motion by Jerry, right?
Correct.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay with you?
Okay. All right. Are we now at select board comments?
Yes.
Which I hope are limited. Please be limited.
Please
Anybody
make
have
it
any
brief.
comments? Anybody have comments?
Yes, I appreciate the perseverance of our audience.
We have ulterior motives.
Me too, but
Anything
that's
else?
all I have to say.
Great. Okay. Next item, town manager's report, Jeff.
I will be as brief as I can, but there were a few things I want to say. First, look, I've been trying, and I am honestly saying this as a statement of fact, and I hope to continue the dialogue, but I've been trying to set up a meeting with Champlain Housing Trust, a face-to-face meeting, for over 6 months now, without success. And that's frustrating.
You know, Joe, I'm going to jump in. I really appreciate that you've been trying to do that. And I think it's a shame that that meeting hasn't taken place. And in light of the recent activities, it really would be nice to have a dialogue.
Yes.
I agree.
And I know that the police department and the kind of the workers at Harbor Place have a good relationship, and I'm happy for that. But, you know, if there's any hard feelings about the NOV that was 2 years ago, I mean, I'm over it. That's for sure. And I would certainly hope that Champlain Housing Trust is over it and that we can have meaningful conversations. The event that happened, I can't remember if that was last Thursday or Friday, but should have ended much worse than it ended.
Right.
And I get calls all the time by people in the neighborhoods, and I'm not able to respond to them because, and it's an email that they are not, I'm not getting a face-to-face meeting. So we're not going to solve that tonight.
Joe?
But I want to make that
Joe,
point.
Joe, you and I will talk about having this as an agenda item and inviting them to appear. And if they don't want to appear, they don't have to appear.
Well, maybe that's the way to do it.
There was a piece on WCX this morning. I don't know if you saw it, but it didn't reflect well on the town. So
On the town.
no.
Just set it up and, let's do it in February. Give them a chance to prepare and take the high road and everything. But, our residents have a right to know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then I want to tell the board and the public, I'll make this, that our state legislators, our reps are going to come next week. I'm sorry, Josh, if you missed that, but we have 3 or 4 topics that we're going to try to review with them. I also know the lieutenant governor is going to be here for that as well. So just what we try to do every year, a preview of the legislative session and talk about any impacts that we might have, some of the big ticket items that we might have some feelings in terms of as the town of Shelburne. So that's next week. And then I want to make one last point, and I've listened to you, Linda, and I've listened to a lot of people, and I just want to make a point that I don't know how many people I've hired in the last almost 4 years that I've been here, but a number of hires, and there's never once, not once, been a hire that has not involved a panel of some sort. That's never, ever happened. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Joe. Someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Jerry. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. I just want to say that I would really appreciate if select board members could be prepared to make their comments a little briefer. Anybody else have anything to say?
Yes, could
Hearing
we?
nothing. All in favor?
I won't even.
Aye.
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 Okay. We're adjourned.